Okay, so as you all know, this is going to be a very special stream. Welcome to the channel, everybody. My name is Merrick TV, and we've had an interesting week. As you all know, we play Guild Wars 2. In fact, I should just say that right now, that's actually what connects everyone in all these boxes. We actually have all have at least met each other in Guild Wars 2. Even though we all have different MMO experiences and play different games, this is the one thread that I think kind of connects all of us. And while I normally stream Guild Wars 2, this last week we had a very cool MMO themed stream week. So every different day of the week I streamed a different game. We did Guild Wars 2 on Monday. Tuesday we did Elder Scrolls Online. Wednesday we did Warcraft Classic and Retail. And then Thursday we did Final Fantasy XIV. Culminating with today's stream, which is going to be the big podcast. We are big fans of the MMO genre. I know that it has been a huge part of my life for, I don't know, I don't even want to say. I don't even want to say how long. It's going to date me so bad. But anyway, I've been playing them for a very long time. You guys know, since EverQuest, I've played most of the MMOs that have come out since then that were big titles. It's always sort of been a big part of my life, and I'd love to be able to get into a bigger discussion, sort of see where the genre is at, where it's going, where it's been. And so I have contacted some of my friends who also like to talk about this kind of stuff, who are very knowledgeable. And in addition to being those things, Sassy Cat also, wrong side. Sassy Cat, also another content creator, streamer in the Guild Wars 2 community, was kind enough to join us on channel today. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start off by introducing ourselves and sort of getting into why we're here, how we got into MMOs in the first place, what game that was that got us into it, how we ended up getting into it in the first place, and what brought us to this point. So I will get started since I'm conveniently in the middle. Hi guys, I'm Merrick TV. So I have been playing MMOs since EverQuest, really since sort of the dawn of the modern MMO genre, right? Like most MMOs can still feel very intrinsically linked to the format of EverQuest, and I've been enamored with it ever since. I was that classic kid when I was young that my parents were like, why are you playing so many video games? It's never going to get you anywhere. It's definitely not a good idea. Of course, now, since then, I actually met my now wife, Junie, in Guild Wars 2. So MMOs have really defined my life. It definitely kept me out of trouble when I was a kid, or at least kept me out of some trouble that I would have gotten into, in addition to the trouble that I did. I met some of the best friends that I've ever had in my life in MMOs, which is huge, and because of them I've actually moved from California to New York. I mean, MMOs have legitimately turned my life upside down, not to mention the stream and how important this has all been to us in the last couple of years. So I'm incredibly grateful for the MMO genre as a whole. The game that I started with was EverQuest, and it's actually a really funny story. I'll try to keep it quick, but this is great. Basically, I had a friend in high school who eventually came to me and said, dude, I grew up with this kid, and we actually ended up going to different high schools. And so when we met up one time, it was actually in Scouts. He came to me and was like, bro, you will not believe this. I got a story to tell you. There's this kid, okay? He was a straight A student. He had a girlfriend that liked him. He was popular. He had friends. He had a good life. And then he found this game. There's this terrible game out there. It has ruined his life completely. He has lost his girlfriend. He doesn't shower anymore, let alone go out and spend time with her. She's dumped him. He doesn't go to school anymore. He's been failing school. He's about to get kicked out. It was a private school. He was on the basketball team. He's lost his basketball scholarship. He does nothing, and it's ruined because this game is so all-encompassing. You have a whole life inside the game, so he doesn't live his real life. Isn't that awful? And by the time he finishes telling the story, my jaw has just been falling farther and farther and farther. It's on the floor now at this point, right? And he goes, right? And I go, what is the name of this game and where can I find it? I want to ruin my life too. It sounds amazing. What kind of game could do that? Like, I was so excited, and he was just flabbergasted. And sure enough, what ended up happening was that one of my best friends was given, and we were in high school, right? One of my best friends was given like $200 by his mom to go to Comp USA, I'm dating myself again, to go and buy his grandmother a printer, okay? And having no idea how much printers cost, or what a good printer was versus a bad printer. So we took that $200, we went to Comp USA, he found a $50 printer, bought the printer, and they were like, we're spending the rest on video games, right? So they ran around there buying different stuff, and then it was like, I turned this corner, and right there in front of me was a giant display of the first expansion for EverQuest. I was like, oh my god, I grabbed everyone. I was like, guys, come here, this is it. This is the game that ruins lives. We're all buying it today. So we did. We bought the game, we went home, we installed EverQuest, and it has basically defined so much of our lives ever since. So this isn't a trivial thing. MMOs, I think gaming in general, but MMOs specifically, are social experiences. This is where you get interaction with other people, and anything that's other people and communities coming together really make for I'm choking it. Really make for powerful experiences. So that's why I'm very passionate about these games. So that's my story. Who wants to go next?
I guess I could go.
Okay, yeah. Okay, even more hype and enthusiasm than me. Go.
I was gonna say, who's gonna follow that up?
I know. All right, so my MMO history is much shorter. Although I played video games since I was like a little kid, and a lot of different computer games like Monkey Island, which we streamed a little while ago. But the first MMO was actually Fiesta.
Fiesta.
Which very few people probably remember, and I think it's still available. I think it's on Steam now. You can play it through there. I never really got to max level, so I don't really count it as the first MMO. Like my first real MMO was Guild Wars 2. And I was one of those people who I did not play games socially. So I came from a single player background, like entirely. And so when I got to Guild Wars 2, I got to level 80. I asked a few of my friends who I knew sort of were okay with playing like PC games to come and join me. And they did for like a month, and then they gave up on it. And then finally I had to accept the fact that I was going to have to join a guild. And I was like, oh no. So then I like researched all these different guilds, and I finally found one, and then that's where I met Merrick, and the rest is kind of history, right? Because like I wanted to do end game content, I wanted to do fractals, which was the end game content at the time. There were no raids yet, and that's how it went. And then after that, I've played like WoW and Elder Scrolls Online, and now Final Fantasy, which there's a Moogle there, which I love, and a lot of others, I guess. STO, Star Trek Online, I'm sure I'm forgetting them, DC Universe, and even back and played a little EverQuest on the P1999 servers, which I really liked. So I'm sure we'll talk about that, though, during the podcast, so I'll leave it at that.
Do you have a Moogle attached to your chair? Is that what you did?
I do have a Moogle attached to my chair. I put it behind the pillow, so it's sticking out on the side.
That is great. Also, I am assuming that all of you have coffee for coffee break?
I'm sorry, I'm a trader. I had a
Mate.
Starbucks matcha drink.
No water.
Oh,
I have sparkling water.
Sparkling water? Cryptic, you were the one that had coffee last
You
time.
went back in the back?
Betrayal. I'm the only one with coffee. You and me, Isa.
Excuse me. Excuse me. I already showed you my mug.
Oh, but there's coffee in the mug?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. All right.
It's actually almost gone. I've drank a lot.
In like 5 minutes.
Okay, who's next?
I guess I can go next. So I've been playing MMOs since like 2012, 2013. Started with EVE Online. Lots of you probably heard of that MMO, but have not played it. It's completely different from every other MMO out there. But I fell in love with, the whole multiplayer team collaboration.
Nuzzle, hold on just 1 second. Nuzzlebot is correct. I actually have you up at max volume. Could you turn your gain up maybe, or?
Yeah, sure. Somebody else can go while I... Give me 1 second.
Work really well through Discord, but not so much through the stream.
What?
Yeah.
Ooh. Fall out of my chair.
I was gonna say I can hear him pretty well, but I don't know. I have your stream turned way down, so I don't get the echo.
It's really cool, Sassy, with the same chair, and we're like both on this at the same time with the same chair.
I know. When I first got in Discord, I was like, wait, I'm in my chair, and I was so confused. I was like, wait, that's not me.
Everyone show your chairs. Check this out.
Exact same chair, me and Judy.
Zala's like...
There's currently a sweatshirt.
It's sponsored by this chair company right now.
Yeah, Secret Labs, get in touch
Pretty
with
much.
us.
Secret Labs, hello, hi.
is that better by any chance, or?
It sounds good to me. Chat, can you guys hear Cryptic okay?
Can you say something else, Cryptic?
Hello world.
The hello world,
Hello,
that's good.
stream.
Okay.
It's a little better, yeah.
I think it's good. It seems better to me.
Okay.
I promise I
can't-
will talk quieter so that you guys can just turn the volume up in general.
Yeah, it's really your fault, man.
It always is. I know. I fully admit it. Yeah. Okay, Cryptic, go ahead.
It was probably your idea for the $50 printer that lasted like 3 days too, wasn't it?
No. I felt bad, okay? She was like 80 years old. It's like, I don't even know what she's printing.
So yeah, I started with EVE Online, and that's a huge. That game has tons of cooperation, and you know, social interaction is a huge part of that game. So when I started getting not bored, but you know, kind of burnt out from EVE Online, I started looking at other MMOs because I wanted that same kind of cooperation in gaming that you really don't get anywhere else. And I moved on to things like Guild Wars 2, playing BDO right now. I've messed around with like WoW and Final Fantasy and stuff. Those aren't really my type of games. But some other niche ones like Fusion Fall and Forsaken World, if anyone heard of that. Some smaller niche MMOs, but yeah, I've been playing MMOs for like 13, 14 years now. Haven't stopped since.
Nice. I met Cryptic in an MMO.
Didn't
Also
you meet
true.
all of us? In an
Did you
MMO?
meet all of us in an MMO?
I mean,
Yeah, you
don't
kinda did.
cheapen the experience, okay?
So-
I feel like you already said that though.
Is it more significant that I met Junie in an MMO? Maybe that's more special. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
it's more of a story for sure.
The rest of us are just passers-by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Nice.
experience.
We tripped, Merrick helped us up, now we, still hanging out.
Okay. Who's
I
next?
guess I'll go. Yeah, I guess I'll
Guess.
go next.
Okay, I was like, we could just go in the circle. Break
Well,
up
I
the
know
circle.
that works too. You can go ahead.
now it's awkward. Okay, now I can go.
It's only awkward if you make it awkward. We're on a roll. We're on
Let's
a roll.
all make it awkward.
I'll do it. All right.
None
so,
of this will be awkward.
Sassy cat. So the first, I guess, experience with an MMO, but looking back, it's not quite the same as an MMO. I think we've talked about this either it was in my stream or someone else's stream, but Guild Wars 1, which kind of looking back, it had some of the elements of an MMO, but then at the same time, like the content became instance, like everything that you were doing was in an instance. And so when my boyfriend at the time like quit and all his friends quit, I was just playing by myself, which you could in that one at least. But Guild Wars 2 was really the one that I like dove into, but I kind of played it mostly alone until I actually wandered into World versus World one day and had no idea what I was in. And I thought there was like some smart AI, like NPCs killing me all the time. I was like, what is going on in this place? And then I saw, like back in the pre-mega server days, and you would have, all the people posting like, hey, join our guild. And there was one that said we were, a small trying to like Zerg bus guild. And I thought, well, that might be good for me because I don't want to join some like huge guild where there's like 400 people and you got to try to get to know everybody. So it was like 20 people in there, and actually met like one of my really good friends. Like we still chat. He's actually streaming right now, so I'm like half watching like PDO. Not really. But yeah, it's like just for like 8 years I've like known this person and like just building those connections and like meeting all of you guys, and it's just been that like solid rock. But I do also play some BDO, not as much now, but every so often I get into like the grind mode and you start grinding. Yeah, I know Cryptic's kind of like, yeah. Yeah, so that Guild Wars 2 is really like, I guess, the bedrock of my MMO experiences. Also, Raz is super cute. Can we pet?
Did you interrupt his world domination plans again, Merrick?
I know, he's so cute.
Dude, I don't even see him. I see him in the webcam. Like, I see him on stream sneaking up to one of the cubes behind me, and I'm like, oh no, I should turn around and stop him before he does something. And obviously, Sassy playing MMOs has become a big part of you streaming, right? Like, one Sassy Cat has a good streaming channel in Guild Wars 2, but I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you started streaming BDO first. No, was that your thing?
I think I started I think with the raids, my 2 raid nights with Nuzzle.
Oh,
actually. Yeah, so the raid group that I have with Nuzzle, I started streaming so Guild Wars 2, and then I did the 1 night a week with with Alex the Elephant in Node Wars. There you go, Alex. They know
Nice.
what's up.
All right, Zalu.
My turn now. All right, I'm Zalu. For those of you who don't recognize my name, but maybe think you recognize my voice, you may know me by another name because when I met Merrick, my in-game name was Zaloon. I've gone by a handful of different names since then.
Mr.
But
Bear.
my yep, Mr. Bear. That's the other one. My history with MMOs started with RuneScape in I want to say 2002 or 2003. I was like 12. That was there were many attempts to convince my parents to subscribe to the game for me, so I had all the extra cool stuff. All of them ended in failure. So but then when I moved from Michigan to Cincinnati, I met one of my best friends in high school, and he was playing WoW at the time, and that transition is really what defined my experience in MMOs. So I played WoW for on and off since the first expansion of the game, and when I take breaks, I just take breaks to play other games or other MMOs like Guild Wars 2 and currently Final Fantasy. So I don't have any fun stories about printers though.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yep.
Yeah, so obviously some of us have been playing MMOs for a very long time. Some of us for not that long. I think this is actually kind of interesting, right? Like you go back to RuneScape in like 2002, right? That's super old school. Like that is really one of the oldest games around.
Yeah.
I think
When they
EverQuest 1 came out in
re-released-
99.
Yeah, when they released old school RuneScape, I was like, yeah, I've already played that game.
EVE Online came out in 2003. So
Which Eve did?
There you go.
2003. It
Are you
actually
serious?
predates-
It's that old?
Eve is a
It-
very old game.
It predates WoW by over a year.
Wow, dude. Okay, I legitimately have no clue that was true. That actually blows my mind. I didn't. Eve is definitely one of the biggest, longest lasting MMOs that I've never even looked at. I had a guy who was the IT guy in my old office, who was obsessed with it, and so he would go he would go into the various offices to work on something, and he'd bring his laptop where he was doing something with EVE Online all day. Like he was just bringing around EVE Online all day in the office that I worked at. And he was trying all the time to make it like a pitch for it being... I mean, if you listen to people describe EVE Online to you, it sounds like they're full of crap. Like there's just no way that a game could be all that they make EVE Online out to be, right? But it's probably one of the most expansive MMOs that have ever existed.
Yeah, I think they put out a trailer back in like 2006, I think, or something, called the Butterfly Effect. If anybody wants to look it up, it's like a 2-minute trailer, but it's really good. And it basically, it's a very simple trailer. It's literally just somebody flying a ship through space, and they talk about how every little action that you do in this universe affects someone else, because everything in the entire universe is player driven. There isn't a single thing that isn't player driven. The economy and all that stuff is player driven. So you going out and shooting someone, or you going out and mining, or you going out and building a ship for someone else directly affects other things that are going to happen in the game. Even the game development is player driven to a certain extent, because they have this like council of stellar management that is players that have been elected. So it's
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a system that I think more, at least MMOs should adopt. I'm sure there are plenty of instances where we could think of if like Teapot or Merrick or Muckluck, people like that were, brought together by ArenaNet and sat down and said, hey, what do you guys think would improve the game? And then, they had that on like an iterative cycle, like every 3 months, every 6 months, they sat down and talked to some big community contributors and asked
I just
them,
want to say how sweet it is that you added me in the list with Teapot and Muckluck. Teapot, Muckluck, Merrick TV. I just want to take a moment to thank you for that. That's cool. You are welcomed back on Coffee Break anytime, my friend.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
WoW actually has something like that. That was developed by Ghostcrawler in the lead up to Mists of Pandaria, and it was a hidden section of the forums that they granted access to specific people, the higher tier raiders, world first raiders, that kind of stuff. Apparently, at this point, it has degenerated into not such a quality form of feedback anymore, but back then reports are that it was actually used to develop the game in very, very positive ways. So I don't know if any other games have adopted it, but in WoW's case, they had it for a short period of time.
So it's interesting that we're talking about this because the one of the things that I wanted to sort of touch on, and I think it's impossible to discuss MMOs right now without talking about the current state of MMOs. We've been talking about how MMOs are really old. A lot of them have been out since 2002. Some of the ones that are still the most popular have been out since 8, 9, 10 plus years, right? If you look at the top 10 most successful MMOs that are going right now, they're very old. And it was interesting because Cryptic and I were discussing this the other day, and we both watched a video by Lazy Peon, right? The Lazy Peon. I'm sure most people who play MMOs probably know this guy. He's a huge MMO content creator on YouTube. He's done a ton of stuff, made a lot of really impactful videos for me. I remember watching his Ashes of Creation video a while ago that single-handedly made me like the hypest person in the world for that game. It looks incredible. But he has like specifically influenced MMOs just by his recommendations or where he goes to play things. Like people will go and check it out. And so he's a very influential dude, and I really like that. But if you go and look up MMOs today, what you end up finding there is a plethora of videos that are like, why are MMOs failing? Or why is the genre of MMOs stagnant? He came out with one that was talking about the absolute state of MMOs right now, and he's very critical about the genre as a whole and how it has sort of come grinding to a halt, basically. How it's gotten so much less attention from developers or leaps and bounds made forward in gameplay and capability than any other genre of gaming by a long shot. And a lot of his solutions, when he discusses that, right, it's interesting. He does a whole bunch of critiquing, most of which I agree with, and then he starts talking about what could fix it. And we got into some of that just now. One of his big things was trying to get people to feel like they're involved in the direction of the game. He says that it doesn't matter how cool the story is for an MMO for him, if it's a scripted state, like a scripted set story chapter that comes and changes the world in a very intentional, specific, scripted way as a new patch comes out or a new expansion comes out, that immediately cheapens the experience for him, and that no story could be good enough, because if you're in a game for a story, MMO is the wrong genre for you to be in. There's this myriad of other single-player games that can tell much better stories. So his theory is that in order to make an MMO successful, it has to be not only massively multiplayer, but massively multiplayer impacted. And like, you must be able to impact the game in a great way based on the player base itself. So like the council, the people you were talking about making changes or checking in with people and actually having them have something to do with it. Somebody told me the other day that Classic RuneScape, this was really interesting to me, I did not know this. Classic RuneScape, in order to make any changes to Classic RuneScape, the developers put forward the changes ahead of time, and they have to be voted on by the player base, and they will not make any changes unless there's 80% plus voted yes for a change. I mean, that is insane. That is absolutely insane to me. Like that I can't even imagine what that would do in most gaming scenarios, like in most gaming communities. I don't know what that would end up being, but what I think it is indicative of, and if you go and you look and see the significance of RuneScape, Classic RuneScape, and Classic WoW, right? There seems to be some desire for for something that is no longer available in modern MMOs, right? There seems to be some sort of thing that people are very protective about the state that the game used to be in, or maybe a greater distrust of where developers are going to take games, that there's like this giant divide between where directions the developers take a game versus what the actual community wants. So community interaction or community mediation of developer developments is kind of like an interesting topic, right? Like, what do you guys think of that?
And for context, real quick, just looking at like the top 10 MMOs by population, the newest game on that list, if you exclude pseudo MMOs like Destiny, is actually Black Desert, which was in 2014. So we're talking 7 years was the newest MMO that is in the top 10 list. And I think we can all agree that like that was a renaissance, like the early teens, right? The early, like we had 2011, 2012, 13, a lot of MMOs came out in there.
Yeah.
So at the very end of that, we got Black Desert. And then there hasn't been a big MMO since, not one that's succeeded. So just a little context there.
And BDO, I believe he was discussing it in his video as well. Like, even though it is still the newest one, it also had like a major rework in 2018 or something like that. So like probably the most modern looking and feeling of any MMO experience that you get is BDO. And what's weird is that no longer seems to translate directly to a game being the most successful. Like, BDO is successful, there's no argument there, but I don't think it is strictly because of that. Not when the number 2 game is RuneScape, classic RuneScape, right? And the number 1, World of Warcraft, again, out since 2003. So like, and it's certainly not the newest, flashiest, most exciting version of an MMO gaming experience. So there is something about our genre where you can go, what the hell are people looking for, right? It's not necessarily the newest, flashiest, fastest thing. And some people are the most excited and most protective about a very old experience, which is really weird. So that you got people like Lazy Peon saying like, oh, there hasn't been any new innovations in a very long time when you have to have something totally different. And yet there's this large contingent of MMO players that are like, oh my gosh, I miss the way things used to be. Why isn't there a game that represents that? I want to go back in time. And so we as a community are really very split. And I do want to get you guys checking in on that, but one of the interesting things about MMOs in general that I just want to highlight is that we are a very solid community. And he talked about that as well. Like the people who play MMOs, typically speaking, Zalu said this when he introduced himself, right? He's like, I will take a break, but just to go play another MMO. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the truth of MMO gamers. We are a very special group of people that will all, like most MMO gamers, follow 2 rules. One, they are always, or they're usually only playing one MMO at a time. Usually that is true. And rule number 2 is that they're almost always playing an MMO. So when they quit the one, they're moving to another. And that specifically makes this genre incredibly hard to balance, because unlike a regular gamer, if you go to the store and you're like, should I buy Soul Calibur 6 or Zelda? Like, what kind of question is that? Like, you're gonna buy both and you're gonna play both. Like, one success does not impact the other. But in MMOs, it does. It is the weirdest thing. It's a subscription service in a weird way, even if it doesn't have a subscription. So it's like, I'm gonna leave Netflix and go to Hulu. You know, like there's a weird paradigm there that is very bizarre, and it makes balancing this stuff really strange. Really strange.
Yeah, and I think we've seen the industry as a whole, the gaming industry as a whole, kind of take a lot from MMOs and be successful from those things. Like we've seen, if you look at like other top 10 MMO lists that include pseudo MMOs like Destiny and Division and stuff, and like Star Citizen and stuff that isn't even released yet, that is in like alphas and betas, they are quickly like knocking the normal MMOs off the list. This one list that I'm looking at here, Destiny is number 7, so it knocked 3 MMOs off the list. So I think there's a lot of success to be had in MMOs. It's just, what are the changes that need to be made to keep the progression going? Because the MMO genre as a whole is at least one generation, maybe we're going on 2 now, behind the rest of the gaming.
At least, yeah, I would say 2. I would say 2 full generations behind, which is really bizarre. So then it becomes, what is it that we're looking for in an MMO, right? Like, this journey that I took over this last week was really interesting for me. I went back and I played a lot of MMOs that I haven't looked at in a while, right? We did Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy 14, ESO, and World of Warcraft. And I was trying to ask myself every day, like, what is it about this game that I like? What is it that draws me towards this game versus other games? And there's some really big core sections, I think, that split people up in what they're looking for and how accessible they are. Just to give you some context right now, my wife up here, Juniper, is madly obsessed with Final Fantasy XIV. I've never seen her so into a game in my life since we met in Guild Wars 2. She loves this game. She's created a little army in our Discord. Zalu, down there. Another good friend of ours we met in Guild Wars 2, but is now absolutely 100% Final Fantasy XIV. And just to give some background, I have been struggling with this for over a year. Like, I have a really, really hard time getting into Final Fantasy XIV. I could see the things that are good and the things that are bad, but there are very specific things about each MMO that I've gone through in this last week, and I've really asked myself, like, what is it that turns me towards or away from a different game? So I'd like to just go over some of the differences, some of the main categories that I like to break a game up into. And the first one, just since we're talking about Final Fantasy XIV, I don't know if you guys in chat play Final Fantasy XIV. Looks like you do. There's some enthusiasm.
Your chat is only Final Fantasy right now. I don't know what to tell you.
Sassy, we're losing the war here. We haven't even just started.
Just started, yeah.
Just started. We're already losing.
Yeah, you guys don't know, but I split them up. So Final Fantasy, BDO, and BDO. These are and then we're all Guild Wars 2 players, so we can all sort of talk about it that way. But one of the things that I think is really easy for me to review, since I went into so many games recently, is new player experience. And I really want to talk about this because when you're trying to get players into an MMO, one of the biggest hurdles for me getting into Final Fantasy was that I'm constantly hearing the same thing. It is just wait, it gets better, right? Like, and I've been told that like a million times over the course of like quite a long period now. New player experience, I think, is an incredibly important thing in MMOs, especially now, right? Like, every once in a while I'll be streaming Guild Wars 2 and I get a brand new player to Guild Wars 2, and it's so interesting. They're like, you know what? I thought this game was dead, or like, I never even heard of this game. I just found it, and wow, this game is really cool. There's this thing that if I know that I can get a player to play Guild Wars 2 for 5 minutes, chances are they're gonna have fun. Like, whether or not they play it past 6 months or something down the line, that's a whole other discussion. But Guild Wars 2, for all of its faults, is really, really good at new player experience. And I think new player experience is very, very important. I want to get into Final Fantasy XIV, and I'm fully aware at this point that there's a lot of content at the end of that. But it is pretty hard to get into in the beginning, right? I think even you Final Fantasy people can agree with that, right? Would you say that that's true?
There's no argument against that. The new player experience in Final Fantasy is abysmal. It's one of the worst parts about the game, and it really sucks. It's one of the reasons I have a really hard time trying to get people that I know to play it, because I have a lot of MMO friends from other games, and I'm like, man, if I could get these guys to come play with me, it'd be great. But the sale is, hey, I'll see you in 200 hours of gameplay. And it's like, that doesn't work. I don't know.
And by the way, those 200 hours, not going to be great.
Yeah. I mean, I'll play with you when I can. But the other thing is that there's parts of it that are strictly single player that I can't, even if I want to, even if I'm like available 24/7 to help you, you have to do parts of it on your own. And I'm just going to wait until you're done.
And just for clarification, there's no, because I didn't make it very far in Final Fantasy. There's no way to skip any of that, right? Like, you have to slog through.
There is.
I mean, there is now, but
that you can pay for to get all the way to the first expansion.
Yeah.
It actually completes all the quests for you that you could possibly need in the base game.
Okay. So let's talk about that.
I don't know.
Hold on, because this is an interesting discussion, right? Because Final Fantasy XIV
It
is a story-driven game. Like, the reason, I think most of the reason that people think that it's a really good game is because of the story. So telling me that in order to enjoy this story-driven Final Fantasy RPG, I have to spend money to skip a huge amount of story is a really weird sell, right? That's a bizarre thing to do. Most people are going to feel like, wow, well, I'm here for the story. There's no way I want to do that. And I was one of the ones that was most against, like, drudging through the story to get to the part that I wanted to. All my friends were higher level. They were all raiding. I raid with all these guys in Guild Wars 2. I wanted to be able to raid with them in Final Fantasy. But even with how much I hated, I was like, this is a Final Fantasy. Like I know how frustrated I've gotten in the past when people skip Final Fantasy story, right? Like, do you guys ever have that experience? Listen, I'll just tell you, when I was a kid, Final Fantasy VII was like, I'm of the age where that was like a life-changing game, okay? Like, it was an introduction to an RPG style of storytelling that I had never seen before. You've probably heard old boomers like me talk about how impactful Final Fantasy VII was, right? So, but it was really frustrating because I'd be like, oh my gosh, this game changed my life, bro. From school, come over and play this video game, right? And I sit them down in front of the game, and they're like, oh my gosh, okay, I heard you talk this up. And they sit there and they're just mashing the A button, skipping all the text, like, gosh, this is so boring. When does the game start? And they're skipping all of the chat. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's like reading a book and just ripping out pages, you know, like you're not getting anything from it. And so for me to go to a game where I'm like, oh man, should I pay for this skip? Is hard. It's hard. Like, so Final Fantasy players, would you guys recommend doing that at this point?
Very rarely. I would say it really depends upon who I would be talking to the game about. I would do it with great hesitation if I was going to recommend that to anyone, because it's like, even with a good book that maybe gets better halfway through the book, or maybe even if you have to get through the whole first book and then you wait till the second book, there's still things that, like, there's little things that you're going to have experienced that, even if they're kind of boring at the time, they're going to make your experience of later content more three-dimensional and more in depth. So like, it would be very hard for me to recommend that unless I knew that the person was then just never going to play at all, unless they actually skipped the content. And in that case, I might in certain circumstances. But I think with Final Fantasy, the way to get past the issue with the bad initial gameplay is if you enjoy the world, you enjoy the graphics, you enjoy the music, and you do genuinely like your character. I think that's probably the best way to be able to get through that initial content in a positive way.
Let me just say that the music in Final Fantasy 14 is maybe some of the best music I've ever heard in any video game. I'm just going to give it to you.
It's my favorite. It is my favorite. I like it more than Guild Wars 2 even.
And there's so bloody much of it. Like, every time I do something new, there's a new, I'm like, there's another epic song? Like, how big is the OST on this? It's like, it's insane. It's insane.
Yeah, so
I watched a lot of Final Fantasy 14 streamers, like, just to like, because I love the graphics. Like, it looks really pretty in the music. Yeah, and I mean, I like the streamers as well. Like, but
having that music on, I actually was just keeping the game open because it's nice. They never kick you out. Doing other things, and I'm away in game, and I'm just listening to the music. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend it to people that I feel like would enjoy the game, but would not play it otherwise. And I think in chat we had a couple of people mention that, like, Shiva's Fury said that there's definitely some friends that they would go that route with, just because of all the
to skip the story.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so I just heard something really crazy the other day that I didn't know. ERP winner Roka, right, from Guild Wars 2. Roka, very popular, successful raider, badass raider in Guild Wars 2, is one of the many people, and this blows my mind actually, because it feels to me like Final Fantasy 14 is so far removed from Guild Wars 2. The combat system so drastically different, the pacing utterly like uncomparable. It is so bizarre. But when people burn out on Guild Wars 2, there's like this very specific path. Like, so many people that I know have left Guild Wars 2 for Final Fantasy 14 specifically. Like, that game more than any other game.
Fluffy unicorns dancing on rainbows. Being fluffy unicorns dancing on rainbows.
Roka is one of those
Sloppy
dudes.
has gifted a sub
Roka
to
is
Moe.
one of the guys that was a hardcore raider in Guild Wars 2 and moved on to be a hardcore raider in Final Fantasy 14. And I found out yesterday he bought the skip. He skipped all of A Realm Reborn. He skipped the whole thing as far as he could just to be able to get to raiding, because he was a raider who basically probably like omitted most of Guild Wars 2 content that wasn't raids, and was willing to absolutely do the same thing for Final Fantasy 14, and admitted in stream yesterday that he would have quit and not made it to where he's at now, being a very endgame raider, if not for the skip. So I guess there has to be some validity to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what you're playing the game for. You know, if you're only there to raid, which I know a lot of people in Guild Wars 2 only raid, a lot of people in WoW only raid, but the Final Fantasy community that's existed since the initial launch of A Realm Reborn, most of them are there because it's a Final Fantasy game. And so that's why there's so much praise on the story and the how dare you skip the cutscenes mentality. But I mean, just like you said, if you really don't care, or if you don't find it interesting enough, the skip serves a purpose, and that Final Fantasy probably has more subscribers because of the skip than they would otherwise have. So
Right, yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
and she in chat also said that like it's kind of hard though, from this person's perspective, to have to buy the game and to buy a skip just to get to the sort of the content that they're looking for, as well as the subscription.
It's
Yeah, I
interesting,
like-
right? Because it assumes a certain amount of investment on your part, that you have to be able to get to that point. Most people, I think, like today, we have to say that Final Fantasy XIV is successful. It's very successful. It's much more successful than Guild Wars 2. So there's something to it for sure. And the more people that are there, you should hear the players of Final Fantasy XIV. There's the meme that was shared the other day, right? That was like, you either quit in A Realm Reborn super bored, or you live long enough to see yourself becoming living advertisement for this game.
Yeah.
And that's real, dude, because like I like, even though I walk through the game going, I don't get it, I'm not super into this, there's enough people that I keep hearing saying these things that I trust, that it really makes me think about it. So I don't know, it's at least fascinating to me that Final Fantasy XIV developers have a certain awareness of this. They have recently gone through a crunch where they've shortened the amount of MSQ, it's what main story quest, because there was so much bloat in the original game, pointless questing that really didn't amount to anything and was very boring. And they even sell these skips, right? Like, I'm sure there are probably people out there that would want something like that in Guild Wars 2 or other games, but they're not going to do it, right? Like, Final Fantasy must know in the background, like our whole first expansion kind of, or our whole first base game, not so great.
Well, yeah, like it's interesting that you say that, because Victoria in chat just mentioned like the free trial. Is this true? Like you play to level 60 on all classes for free?
Yeah.
Technically, as long as you don't play with other people.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
has a very advanced
Right.
trial.
They must realize that, and that's probably why they have such an advanced trial, that you can do all this content solo but you just can't do anything social in the game. But maybe they don't expect you to necessarily want to until you get to a higher level, because they know how long it can take to get through this initial game content.
So I want to like read what Hat said a moment ago. He said, so I think a main reason most MMOs fail as of late is because of the initial time investment. If you're trying to change to a different MMO, most people really don't enjoy the new player experience. It's like replaying a game with a forced tutorial. And that is a really interesting concept, and I think it speaks a lot to sort of a revelation I had the other day when I was playing WoW Classic. This is kind of weird. Again, it might be generational, and I don't mean generational as of like age, but like sort of what era you got into the MMO genre in. But I think modern games treat the leveling process, or anything that isn't max level, as completely trivial. It is just crap to have to get through to get to the actual game, right? And I think most MMOs have been focusing that direction to try to shorten that process, or to like speed you up to max level super quickly. Like Guild Wars 2, I'm constantly fielding questions from new players in Guild Wars 2, like, oh, I have a boost, should I use the boost? Like I want to get to end game right away. I want to do this, I want to do that. And one of the things that I'll give credit to Guild Wars 2 is that I think it has a really, really good new player experience. That the leveling, the intermediate content there is still worth doing. In fact, I find myself protective of it. I'm like, well, don't just skip all that. That would be such a bummer. If you rush to the end, it's not even like in Guild Wars 2, it's not even like if you get to the end, you better get there quickly because you're going to get left behind, right? That's one of the weird things about Guild Wars 2, is that its content never invalidates previous content. So it's a weird thing. If you were to rush and try to skip, I feel like you're going to cheapen the experience. Whereas in Final Fantasy XIV, even true, in chat there, who I know is a big Final Fantasy enthusiast, said that he would recommend the story skip to some people because they know that they will struggle. So it definitely depends. It depends on the game, and I think it's a failing of the game to completely discount a leveling experience, right?
Well, it sounded like what Zalu was saying, that if somebody new is coming into Final Fantasy 14, that the more experienced players can't necessarily either, I've not played it, so I'm not sure if this is true, but it sounds like maybe you can't go back, or maybe you don't necessarily want to go back, whereas I feel like Guild Wars does a very good job of interspersing the story within all these like different maps. And even like level 80, like 8.5 year, whatever, players are still going back to these maps to do like world events and that kind of thing. And if I see someone ask like in map chat, like, hey, how do I get to this POI, or, I need help with the jumping puzzle, like you see people answering them all the time. And I think that's like, it's a smart move that they did that helps with that new player experience,
as well as replayability, right? Which is what you're talking about there. Final Fantasy XIV has an interesting concept called New Game Plus that allows you to go back and replay old content. But my experience thus far is that most people would never dream of wanting to go and redo A Realm Reborn. Like, I can't imagine that that's something that somebody would go out of their way to try to do.
Oh, Derek said something, how one thing he likes about RuneScape is how the game doesn't ever really expect you to get to max level. And I guess in that way, it makes the journey more about the focus rather than, skipping.
So there must be something interesting about older games, right? Because I can tell you that definitely was true of EverQuest. This is weird. This is, of course, maybe not a relatable story because most of you guys didn't play EQ. But I can tell you that for like 5 years of playing that game, I didn't have a single max level character. And, I mean, how crazy is that to even think? Like years and years.
Well, the same thing's true.
BDO.
Same thing's true in BDO. Yeah, it's not the game does not expect you to get the max level.
No.
There isn't really a max level, honestly. Like,
they keep adding it when someone gets close, it goes even higher.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting.
And you get like 0.001%. Like, it's insane. And there's people, that's all they do. They grind it. You can go in the BDO like stream category, and they just grind for hours and hours and hours.
Wow.
yeah, that's why we were talking before about like the slight gear progression and like slight level character progression. Like that's one of the things that, I mean, obviously there's some things in BDO that wouldn't work in any other MMO, but I think that's one of the things that makes sense in a lot of MMOs, is just to have this slight progression so people don't feel like, you talk about Final Fantasy, if you don't do this skip, you're stuck doing 200 hours of story. You are useless to everyone else around you until you finish that. And that's a big time investment that isn't required in other games.
One thing I like about Final Fantasy, though, is that every time we've had to do like so one of the experiences of Final Fantasy, because I wanted to be able to say it was basically like a regular RPG, like a Final Fantasy RPG. It does have that vibe to it a lot with the way that the storytelling sort of works. But an interesting thing about Final Fantasy is that consistently throughout the leveling experience, and I think solo ability is another really big topic when it comes to MMOs. Like, a lot of modern gamers tend to want their whole MMO to be soloable, right? That's definitely an enormous shift from the way that MMOs used to be. This is a big change.
I was going to touch on that. I'm glad you're talking about it.
Yeah, but like Final Fantasy is interesting, right? Because so much of it is soloable in story, and in fact mandatory, which is bizarre. Junie and I are next to each other. We're doing the same story content, but when we get to a little event, like we have to actually leave the group in order to do it. You have to do it solo. But a whole bunch of times, kind of like in Guild Wars 2, how Guild Wars 2 will like walk you up to a dungeon in story mode and introduce it to you. In Guild Wars 2, I don't think you don't have to do it, right? You don't have to do the dungeons. You could just walk right by. In Final Fantasy, you do. And so you have to do all of a sudden a 4-man dungeon or an 8-man dungeon or a 24-man raid, and you like absolutely have to do it. But one of the cool things about it is that everyone who we know who is higher level than us is able to come and join. So every time we got to one of those dungeons, people were able to, like our friends were able to jump in and do it. So even though level cap and that kind of stuff are always going to be an issue, allowing friends to, I guess I want to say it's level scaling, right? I was talking with Junie about this, but it isn't level scaling. It de-levels you. And this is
Level
actually a
sync is what
huge
it's called in
complaint of mine
Final
because I wish
Fantasy.
it was scaling instead of de-leveling. But it at the very least allows you to group with your friends, right? If they're higher level than you.
Yeah.
Right, but
Yeah.
actually, that's an interesting thing to bring up because I know for Final Fantasy 14, I've experienced this one thing, and also with ESO, how to balance what you do by yourself versus what you're doing socially as a community. Like Sarek specifically mentioned, like the whole reason he plays is because you want to have that community experience. But with games like Final Fantasy, because there is so much story and there are so many cutscenes, if you enjoy that in a certain way, it can be really hard to match that up with another person that you're playing with and get that experience that you're looking for. And I noticed that even with ESO, when Marek and I play, we're pretty similar in how we enjoy story, so it works really well for us. But even for us, it can be hard. Like we'll be going into a cutscene, or we'll be doing some sort of single player thing, and that's a whole side of it. And I think with Final Fantasy, there is so much of that, especially in the beginning. It seems like to me that it's sort of hard. Like, how do you put time into that, and then how do you also experience the social side of it at the same time?
If I can wrap some of what we've been talking about back to the original thing you brought up, Merrick, I feel like this is a kind of a subtle example of the long-term effects of the community affecting development, right? So if you think back to EQ or Classic WoW, those were games where getting to max level, the whole process of that journey, that was a big experience in the game. And then slowly the community shifted from caring about, the times where you had to group up at level 23 to do an elite quest to, oh my God, look at that guy's armor. I want that. How do I get that? Now we're all focused on endgame. And all the developers ever see in their forums and on Reddit and wherever else they may look for relevant information is people talking about endgame. And so there's been this slow, over decades, really shift away from any kind of progressive journey. And, we're just pushing into the endgame because that's all anyone ever talks about, because that's all people were focused on for so very, very long. And so I think that's kind of, in the same vein as what you were talking about with the whole, how can the community affect development is what needs to be changed. I don't remember, you said Lazy Peon was the author of the video, but I think that's actually an example of what's happened on accident. Really, it's pretty organic, and so that's from my view, that's where this issue stems from, where we don't care about the leveling. We have these skips, we can buy character level boosts for games because all anyone ever talks about. I mean, think about it. If you're telling your friend about how awesome Guild Wars 2 is, you're not talking about doing, soloing elite mobs in the map. You're talking about, oh, we did this raid and Doom CM and whatever. When I tell people I'm talking about the Savage raids in Final Fantasy, I'm talking about Mythic raiding and WoW. That's all we use to sell games to our friends. And because MMOs are about playing with other people, you want the people you already know to come play the game with you, and you want to tell them about the most exciting thing, which is not leveling anymore. And even back then, leveling was cool, but then you found out what was even cooler. And so that's kind of something that I think has affected development.
I think for like any mature MMO these days, leveling is just another gate that prevents you from getting to, the actual progression that you want to get to. Which in most MMOs is gear, right? Gear is the actual progression you want to get to. So leveling is just like an arbitrary, pointless thing to a mature MMO. To a brand new MMO, it's vital. But once you get past that stage and you're at expansion number 2, number 3, the level means nothing, and you just want to get past it as quickly as possible. Most people, and honestly, condensing, like you said, Final Fantasy did a main story quest condense. BDO has done the same. But BDO built extra experience into those main story quests when they condensed it, so that the leveling process was shortened drastically.
A lot.
I mean, relatively. You remember on release, like getting to 56 was the longest grind humanly possible. Yeah, you can get to 56 now in half a day, right? Yeah. Like it's very quick. And it doesn't sound like Final Fantasy did that. It doesn't sound like Final Fantasy and I think ESO did that recently too, right? They didn't shrink the main quest, but with the new CP thing, getting to 300 CP isn't that bad, right? I mean, anymore. Like I'm doing like dolmens and stuff, and I'm getting CP like left, right, and center. Whereas before, when the cap was like 720 or whatever, getting to 300 was a little bit of a ping pong, you know.
In Final Fantasy, the level isn't the actual gate. Like everything ties back to the main story. So
MSQ, yeah.
that's the problem, is that the real progress isn't your level. The real progress is the story, and so that's why it's hard sometimes to recommend the MSQ skip, is because it's not quite a 1-to-1 with skipping to max level or a high level, because you'll get to a point where, if you want to know why you are where you are and you've bought that skip, you won't find out unless you spend a lot of time doing research that just in stuff that you paid to skip. So it's not quite the same, unfortunately, and it's one of the roadblocks that Final Fantasy has to get over. I don't want to delve too far into a specific game, but they actually have talked about the next expansion ends the kind of story arc that started with the 2.0 release, which was the recreation of the game. And so it will be interesting at the end of the next expansion how the game systems change when they, if they don't feel bound to that story anymore, if they can make all of the existing MSQ that is this grind, if they can make that optional content and then transition it into something more like Guild Wars or WoW, where you just got to get through the current expansion story, and it's a much shorter experience that could fix, so to speak, if you want to call it that, the game. But that's 3-4 years out.
It's a very strange decision to tie it to completing the main story, because like in an MMO, like if I get the max level because of an experience boost or whatever, and I still have main story quests left, it's nice to be able to always go back to that and still do other things. And in Final Fantasy, you have no choice. You'd either do all of it or none of it. You're like, I'm done. I'm not playing.
Which actually makes the game feel very, very linear, right? That is a definite thing about Final Fantasy XIV, which separates it a lot, I think, from a lot of other MMOs. Most modern MMOs are falling into this, the term is theme park MMO, right? I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. I want to be able to hop into whatever content at whatever moment I'd like to do. In fact, Guild Wars 2, phenomenal at representing the theme park MMO, right? You really can just hop in, go wherever you want to, whenever you want to. But Final Fantasy XIV is, I mean, in essence, it is an RPG, right? It is kind of like a single player RPG that you join up with people to accomplish goals in periodically, in which case it is incredibly linear. Now, do you feel like that is a good way to deal with the advancement that happens at max level? I think that's probably one of the things that most MMOs are struggling with. Cryptic and I got into a discussion last night about the gear treadmill, the process of World of Warcraft coming out with a new expansion. And in order to keep things fresh, you have to up the level cap, right, in order to keep going. One of the more innovative ideas of Guild Wars 2 that I believe ended up falling flat on its face in the end is the mastery system, right? They were like, we're gonna never increase the max cap in Guild Wars 2, but instead we're gonna come out with cool masteries that are gonna help you do things. Like, it started off kind of cool. We're getting gliding, we're getting bouncy mushrooms. They felt like they were useful all over the place, but then soon enough, we're not gliding that much anymore, right? We're doing mounts. We're not, the bouncy mushrooms stopped being in zones. And then all of a sudden it turned out to be the mastery system is only giving you masteries for the zone that you are currently in, and you will only be doing that for like 5 minutes, and then you're done, and there's no reason to ever go back. So I think the mastery system was an attempt at making a very innovative way to do alternate advancement. That's what we'll call that. Once you get max level. CP, of course, another completely different way of trying to do alternate advancement. That actually is not unique. That is almost identical to the system that EverQuest used back in the day. It was actually called AA, alternate advancement. But you basically reach max level and then you get like points. And those points increase your potency passively as you dump more and more of those points in. But in Final Fantasy, it is that each new content is gated and locked behind large amounts of story, which again, I wouldn't even say is a bad thing, but it really differentiates it and may be exactly what some people are looking for and exactly what are going to drive people crazy. And
Well, it
Yeah.
definitely gives a new set of challenges because if the story is not part of the leveling experience, then you can take your own individual time on the story and still do max level things with your friends. But here, you have that pressure, right, to get to the end of the story in order to play with your friends. So instead of being able to take it leisurely and only deal with level grinding, now you're story grinding, and that doesn't seem so compatible with experiencing the story on your own time.
yeah.
It takes away, it detracts from the story. Like, you're not enjoying the story if you know you're doing this because you have to, not because you
Yeah.
want to enjoy it.
Becomes a chore.
Well, it
Yeah.
becomes a grind. And I think grind is another thing that, like we were talking a moment ago, how like Sarek said that he never got to max level or for 15 years in RuneScape, right? And the same was true for me in EverQuest. And going back and playing WoW Classic this week was an eye-opener for me because, I mean, it's so cool that WoW Classic exists. If we're doing like MMO anthropology, which is essentially what we're doing here, going to be able to look at an MMO in a time capsule back from 2003 is super fascinating. And one of the immediate things that you experience when you go back is to realize that leveling is 90% of the experience that exists, and it is a grind. And you were grinding mobs, and that used to not be a dirty term. There was not a dirty word to say grind. Like you tried to take the best use of your class, of the strategies that you came up with, you and your friend duoing based on your class's skills, and trying to find the areas and the means in which to do it efficiently was fun and cool and creative and awesome. And that was the experience of the game. You would log on, play for 6 hours. All of it was grinding, and you log off and be like, man, that was so fun. I wish I didn't have to go to work tomorrow. Like, that was a totally different thing. And now the experience of leveling or grinding anything is totally different. And Final Fantasy does actually take that grind and make it story. Because when I'm playing the game now, you guys you know this for sure, I'm going for a very specific goal. I'm not enjoying the leveling process. I want to get to Ishgard. I want to get to Heaven's Ward, where everyone says the game gets good. I want to become a machinist, and I want that now. And so what that's doing is it's making me resentful of every bit of story where they're like, oh, well, it wasn't that epic. Now why don't you go kill 10 rats and then bring me their skin? Like, they'll send you off on like this little sort of like pointless thing that is, I mean, it's not like they're brand new at this. Final Fantasies have always done that. There's exciting moments, and then there's time where you're doing trivial stuff. But man, it just makes me pull my hair out because I'm grinding for something very specific rather than enjoying the journey. And that's
But I think-
probably a difference in the game and a difference in the player base and how they've changed over the years.
Well, I think it also comes back to invalidating things. Like you said, like when you're playing WoW Classic, it's all about leveling because that's what the majority of the focus was. But now in current WoW, nobody cares about that. They just, squish the levels every single time and expand them, squish them, expand them. So the level means nothing because the real grind that you're concerned about is the gear. So you've invalidated leveling as a process. And I think, in where we've seen it being successful, where we've seen like levels and stuff being successful in a game that doesn't really care about them anymore, is where it hasn't invalidated them. So like ESO, it hasn't invalidated your leveling process. You can still grind because you're building CP points, right? And I think that where Guild Wars 2 failed in that regard with the mastery system is that, one, when you go to a new area, those old masteries are invalidated. So that work does mean, less. And then two, it doesn't continue on. There's not this like, real progression that you have to do. And then afterwards, you can still slowly keep working on things a little bit at a time. That skill, that XP that you get just turns into spirit shards and means nothing. We're sitting around with hundreds of thousands of spirit shards.
Yes, true.
Nobody
Yeah.
cares about,
It's also that, like, when they come out these new masteries, like the newest ones, you pretty much have to do in like Drizzlewood or DRMs, and we already know how people feel about DRMs in general. Like, most people don't really care about them, and then Drizzlewood, everyone's like, oh, it's that 2 hour plus long meta.
Oh man, that
But
thing
if
is
you
long.
want to get those masteries, you have to go back to those specific maps. And I understand from the standpoint of they're trying to keep players in these maps, but at the same time, I know people are like, I just buy it and don't care. Like, they get enough points to at least buy it so they can access it one day, but they don't actually. I haven't finished grinding the last one myself. I just haven't felt like
I
going
haven't
back
either.
and doing DRMs and everything. Yeah, it's like, because it doesn't affect anything in the main content I do, like raids like you do, it doesn't affect anything in those. It affects what you do in the DRMs, which I don't really play. So
Oh, what are the DRF? Just clarify.
the Dragon Response missions.
Dragon Response missions. Okay.
Yeah.
I have not done any of them. I've watched
Me neither.
streamers do a couple of them. Junie has literally
They're
zero
long.
concept of what they even are. She's never even heard of them.
They're like 20-minute long. There's like you help like some, whatever it is at the beginning. They're all like the same formula. It's like you help some, whatever NPCs at the beginning. There's an escort and then there's a boss. It's all of them are like that.
You're
and they
missing
were
a golden
so
opportunity
long.
to sell her something extreme. Like dragons are coming out of nowhere, Judy. They're attacking
You
lions.
can't, you can't sell it.
Yo, did you guys see?
Can't
Did you see
sell
the
it.
the April Fool's joke? What do you call it? The patch notes or whatever. One of the things under Jenner was like, also added a bunch of new Elder Dragons, and I just lost my mind, dude. I laughed so hard. It's like every time I turn a corner, there's another Elder Dragon.
That's what dragon response missions are.
That's actually one of my big complaints about Guild Wars 2 is that I feel like the story kind of goes down this monotony of Elder Dragons. And while that's, while they were pretty cool initially, I'll tell you guys just selfishly, the time that I was the most into Guild Wars 2 outside of raiding, right? Like I was telling this to Cryptic yesterday. I don't play Guild Wars 2 like an RPG anymore. It is not an MMO to me anymore. It is like playing to me, and you guys know me, you watch the stream. Most of you guys in chat here, you're aware of my regular stream content. I stream raids, and I love raids because the combat system in Guild Wars 2 is phenomenal. I will never stop saying that. It is absolutely amazing. But what it has come to be for me is more akin to playing Overwatch or Street Fighter. I am performing a skill set that I have honed in a training dummy, and I am performing it well. I've gotten good at it, and I get social experiences where they're like, oh, Merrick, you're great at this. That's so cool. And I'm like, oh, yeah, look at my hammer scrubber. Like I get these fun things, but that's not at all an RPG experience. I'm not actually getting an MMORPG experience from Guild Wars 2. And I have to ask myself why that is. And part of it, not to segue super hard into lore right now, but the moment that I was last into Guild Wars 2 and very excited about the game as an RPG was, and spoilers, sorry, POF spoilers. This is a spoiler alert for anybody in chat. Was when Lissa's mirror was found and Balthazar came out of freaking nowhere and we ended up in the mists and we were about to find out what happened with the gods and Lazarus was involved. Like there was some really epic story going on, and then they just kind of were like, well, you know what? All that was cool, but never mind. Palawa Joko and 2 more Elder Dragons. And I was like, oh God, are you kidding me? It was almost so cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of my, like, because I'm a dorky role player. I know it sounds weird. You think I'm just like a hardcore raider, but in my head, I want to get immersed in a story. I want to get immersed in a world. Game immersion is actually huge for me. I know it sounds weird because all I do is raid, but that's not the kind of gamer I would like to be. That's where my experience has sort of hit a wall. And one of those things is immersion and story. And I don't know. Maybe
I can't believe you insulted the golem like that. He's not a dummy.
Sorry, yeah. We're good friends. We spent a lot of time together.
Yeah. But so I have a question for everyone here since we all play Guild Wars 2. If masteries never ended, if after you got all the core masteries, you could get 0.01 power, 0.01 precision, 0.01 gathering proficiency, just a little tiny small fraction of incrementals.
Champion points.
Yeah, exactly. From, and even if it was still locked to map specific stuff, which would suck, but even if it was still locked to map specific stuff to make people go back and play the old content, would that incentivize you more to go do that stuff? Merrick, would you be joining Pew Train? Sassy, would you be going and doing,
it would necessitate
Dragon's End,
right? I mean, for me and the kind of content that I do, in order to be on the same playing field as other raiders, I would absolutely have to. And maybe having to would be a good thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think this is a really tough debate to have because a lot of what makes Guild Wars 2 special and what makes it really successful in the long run for a lot of the very casual player base that it has built up, that even playing field across the board is such an integral part of the Guild Wars 2 experience for casual players that, you know, like it's a huge selling point that somebody could get max level today and then join us in raids tomorrow at every raid content in the game and can conceivably beat Cryptic in DPS.
Nice.
Wow.
Nice.
Shots fired.
Oh, but you know what I mean. I was gonna say me, but I thought it'd be more fun.
You're scrapper maybe.
So you know, like that is such
I
an
think they
integral
could
part
still
of it.
do that though. They could still do that with like take the champion points, and I mean ESO is a little different. You have to make it to 300 CP now.
Yeah.
But before the CP change, all you had to do is make it to 160. 160, and you could do all still do all the content in the game.
Correct.
And you know how quickly we all made it to 160, and now
That was
they
also the
changed it-
highest gear cap was CP 160. So
Yep,
same thing.
and it still is, but
Still is.
yeah, it still is, but you gotta CP 300 is now the gate for most of the end game content. So now you have to.
It
Now you have to.
functions like a eye level barrier.
Yeah,
Oh,
like I can't do the veteran dungeons that we were doing. I can't do like half of them because I don't have CP 300, so I have to actually grind to that.
Oh, okay.
But the grind, like I said, the grind is going really quick. Like I've only been playing like a couple of hours, and I'm almost to CP 250. So,
Sure.
but I mean, you know, that's what I'm saying. Like I still think like, you know, if they don't have to go as far as ESO did, but if they had something similar to that, I still think someone could immediately play, you know, buy the game, use that level 80 token, and join us in raids immediately with exotic gear, and still beat me in DPS. Their odds of doing that are lower because I would have maybe like an infusion more than them because of this CP system, right? But it's still, I think it would still be possible. Like if this CP system gave you one extra infusion, Merrick, do you really think that would change the game that much?
Well,
I don't think so.
Would the system have any point if it was only that much? Like, I don't think that.
Well,
that would, you know,
I mean, we're getting
striking
to the
that
nitty-gritty
balance
here.
is
Yeah,
the hard part, though, right? Like
yeah,
striking that balance and making it feel like there's a worthwhile investment of time. Outside of raids, right? So like a lot of the investment in other MMOs is in raids. Zalo said it before, and you as well, Cryptic, that it's gear driven, right? And the gear, in order to evolve your character, it is not just spending a lot of time in the SFTA beating up on a golem for skill purposes, but actually tangible progression in terms of gear. And so that becomes a complaint for a lot of people as time goes by, like, oh, I gotta get the gear grind again, right? But like, you also, if you play for long enough in a game that doesn't have that, I think you sort of lose sense of tangible goals. And I said this to you as well last night, Cryptic.
100%.
You have to in Guild Wars 2, and Sassy, maybe you can speak to this too because you've played a lot of Guild Wars 2. But in Guild Wars 2, you have to create your own goals of what you want, because the game is not giving you the goals automatically of what you need.
Yeah.
There's very
That's
few
true.
goals of what you need to do in any content in the game, right? There's very few things that the game forces you to need to do. You might be able to say that agony resistance in terms of fractals was an actual progression that required a certain amount of work when they came out. It's trivialized now, right? Almost completely trivialized. But in order for Guild Wars 2 to stay fun, and every time we've come back and try to do more in Guild Wars 2, what we end up saying is like, oh, let's craft another legendary, you know, like that'll be a goal for us. And then since we really want that goal done, the game becomes more fun. But you have to make those goals yourself based on things that you want, because you don't need them. You know, I don't need that legendary. It's not locking me out of any content that I'd like to do. It's not making me more competitive with Cryptic. Because I got that legendary. I have to find you. Where is everybody? You know, so like you have to make it artificially. What do you think, Sassy? Do you think that like goals in game that were like, if the game made you have to have more goals or a progression of some kind, like a classic MMO would be, would that make your experience better or worse?
I mean, I think for me, I like that it's kind of open-ended in Guild Wars 2.
Sure.
Just that, like, I can decide I want to make Bolt, and someone can like aim super high and say I want to make Eternity, and you know, we're both kind of following a similar path. We're both trying to make legendaries, but we're making the things that we want. And the fact there's Gen 1, Gen 2, and of course Gen 2 you're locked behind doing the collections, but I guess it's their way of again trying to help guide people through maps and older content and everything. But I like that it has that, but at the same time, like I know, like in my stream, your stream, I see it like in Snubs a lot as well. Like you get people, not just the people coming in saying, "Hey, I'm thinking of trying this game," but I see a lot of people coming in and saying, "I'm level, I just hit level 80. What do I do?" I have no idea how to answer that because I'm like, what do you like to do? I'm like, there's PvP, there's world versus world, there's raids, there's fractals. If you only want to do open world, like you can start working on getting mats to make legendaries. Like what legendaries do you like? It's hard to tell somebody, where to go because it is so open. And so like, I guess from the perspective of being asked that question, it's hard to answer. Same as when someone says, what class should I be? What's the best class to be? I'm like, the one you like to play. Or if you're trying to go into like super specific content, unfortunately, sometimes it is gated that way. Some, people have that mentality, but I prefer that it's open-ended like that. Like I know, I think I did like BDO. It is a little bit more like there is other armor sets, but I think it's kind of like Guild Wars 2, but you're basically driving toward boss armor and that's it. Like, where the goal is, you're going from point A to point B, at least in terms of like, for me doing Node War, like there's a limit that they want you to have, for your AP DP, so like your attack power and your defense. So exactly where to go. I know what the goal is in that game. I know I'm supposed to like go out and like get a few mats that help out in Node War, and like I know exactly what to do, which it is kind of nice, but like I said, at the same time for Guild Wars 2, the replayability of it is that now I've made my bolt. Okay, what do I want to do next? I want to, now go make Astralaria. What do I have to do for that? Or, I want to get into raids. Maybe now I'm bored with my Condi Firebrand. I want to play something else. So I've been learning Condi Reaper.
This is why I've managed to play this game for so long. It's switching around builds like that is the only thing that kind of keeps me sane. Let's make a hammer scrapper.
That's on my list. Hammer scrappers on my list. I have one scrappy cat. I have the tune. I gotta make it.
I think that it's important that we acknowledge what you just said, because everything that you're saying is that all of these things that we have been discussing here that make Guild Wars 2 kind of unique, those are, while it might be frustrating for us who are like way well into the end game, who've been like old school jaded players, right? Those don't at all apply to 90% of the people that are playing the game. In fact, every time, even though I have a lot of complaints, and just for my own play style and the way that the game is, and the goals system and how I don't play it like an RPG, all the things that I've said, even though that's true, every time someone comes into my chat and says like, hey, how is Guild Wars 2? Should I play it? The answer is always yes, absolutely yes. Every complaint that I've got about the game has nothing to do with the new guy who's starting today. He's going to have a great time. He's going to have a great solid year of this game, at least, right? Maybe 2 years. And by then, maybe the new expansion is coming out. So a lot of the things that make it challenging for me are the exact same things that make it so much fun for the newbie or a lot of people that are playing the game much more casually, right? That sort of open-endedness that you were talking about, Sassy. Remember, this, like I said, Guild Wars 2 is the ultimate in theme park MMOs. Exactly like you said. I got max level. What should I do? It's like, well, you can kind of do anything you want, and you can do it to its nth degree. You can go all into one thing. And the interesting thing about the itemization in Guild Wars 2, and oh my gosh, is itemization another topic I'd love to talk about. Itemization in Guild Wars 2 is such a double-edged sword. It is absolutely a terribly double-edged sword. It has really good things and really bad things. But one of the really nice things is, if you get to max level and you're like, you know what? I hate everything in this game except for crafting, or SPVP, or open world meta events, or World v World, or raiding. No matter what theme park attraction you choose, you're going to get the best gear in the game from it. If you do that enough, right? It is available to you everywhere. It's not locked behind any one thing. So that might feel very different for some of us. But I just wanted to acknowledge that, like, while for me, I could be like, oh, this is the reason why I'm struggling with this game. This I don't like about it. I'd prefer it was done like this. That is not going to be the common experience for a lot of players who play this game. It's certainly not the newcomer. New player experience in Guild Wars 2. We talked about Final Fantasy 14 having maybe a bad one, even among the most enthusiastic over here, the most enthusiastic Final Fantasy players that I know on the right side of the screen. They acknowledge that the new player experience is not very good. The new player experience, even though you might say that the end game experience in Guild Wars 2 is lacking, the new player experience is phenomenal, right? I think we can all agree on that as well. Or does anyone disagree with that?
No, I've actually got a someone I know who he normally is like a big like Final Fantasy 14 streamer, and he had been hearing about Guild Wars 2, and so just this past week he streamed like a couple times him playing Guild Wars 2, and he was saying like the experience that he had there, as far as like what he could do in Guild Wars 2, because if you guys are saying everything's locked behind the story, of course he's already at end game and Final Fantasy 14 or whatever end game I guess is for Final Fantasy 14. But like we were like leading him around like Kessex Hills, and then someone's like, hey, let's like go over here because this world boss is going to be up in like X amount of time. And so he doesn't have mounts or anything, but like just seeing it like through his eyes and everything was like he gets to Shadow Behemoth, and of course we've done this how many times, like Shadow Behemoth for like 8 years. You're like, okay, there it is again.
But I bet he was like, holy crap, look at this.
Yeah, he was sitting there taking screenshots, and I was like, please
adorable.
at least hit one once so you get loot, or like go get loot, and then don't forget to like get the loot, because now all of us, we can just pick it up automatically.
Yeah.
Like saying you gotta go over there and go hit F, and just like being able to take him around to different places, and then when everyone, because he's EU, so of course everyone starts getting late, they go to bed, he's like, all right, I'm gonna hop back in and do my story. Being able to do the different things right at the beginning, he noted that was something that was great, and that the community already, not just people who were like watching him and who play Guild Wars 2 hopping in with him, but just on maps, he's like, everyone seems to be helpful if they have questions or they see him, and I think that's a huge part of Guild Wars 2 is the community, really.
It is, and the events that bring the community together, right? I think that was one of the most iconic things about the game. I can tell you right now, the single most unique thing about Guild Wars 2, when we walked into Guild Wars 2 from other MMOs before that, I can tell you the single greatest difference between that game and every game before it was that when you saw other people in the world, you were happy. Instead of like, oh god, they're near my camp, they're near my mobs, they're stealing my nodes, like all that, the whole concept of seeing other people used to be kind of negative unless they were in your group or your friends already. Guild Wars 2 did such a good job of not making that the case. They're there to help you. It makes dynamic events happen, or bigger dynamic events occur, or the ability to complete meta events, all these things. Nobody can steal anyone's nodes, right? Nobody can steal your experience. Nobody can steal your kills.
Loot.
Anyone can res
Loot's
you
all separate.
when you go down. Like there's a lot of like big changes around community, I think, in Guild Wars 2. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I just recently watched Xandri, which is a streamer who just came from Final Fantasy 14. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Really like big stream community, played a lot of Final Fantasy 14, and oh man, has it been interesting to watch a Final Fantasy 14 main come to Guild Wars 2 for the first time and see their experience going through this, like from the opposite perspective than what I just happen to be going through at this exact moment, right? And it's so interesting. I've come to realize how jaded I am, right? Because they, like you were saying, get really excited when you go and see Shadow Behemoth for the first time. You're like, oh my gosh, like 50 people just came together to do this giant thing. How cool. And then you actually beat the boss and you're like, well, that was epic. Look at that giant treasure chest. I get to go loot this giant treasure chest. And me, like old jaded Guild Wars 2 player goes, I'm rolling my eyes like, well, you know what you're going to get from that treasure chest. You're going to get 2 pieces of crappy unidentified gear and you're going to sell it. And it's really pointless. But to her and everyone else who's trying it, they're like, oh my gosh, that was so epic. And it really does serve to let me know that the game does have a lot that I just no longer appreciate in the same way. but that is really appreciable by a lot of other people. And I don't want to ruin it for them. You know, I don't want to say anything negative.
That's true, but like you said, you're opening that treasure chest, but we know you're not going to get anything in it. But somebody knew the mystery and the idea that, well, I don't know what I'm going to get out of this. Like, it could be really good. And that in itself, I guess, could really like take somebody a while until they figure out, okay, really, there's nothing worth anything in here. But as a strategy for creating a new experience to keep people engaged and interested, I feel like that brings up a really good point. Like, does there have to be anything really cool in that chest as long as people think there might be for an extended period of time?
I think there does for veterans, right? Like, I mean, imagine if that you know, all the things that Merrick said about, you know, fighting Bihi is fantastic up until you go and loot that chest. And for a new player, he thinks, oh, well, when I come back the next time, there's going to be good loot there. But it sucks for us because we know there's not. If that chest instead dropped a piece of a gear set that you could only get from Bihi, you would be going to Bihi, and you would be happy to be going there.
You got it, dude.
So.
That's why I think itemization is such a big discussion, specifically in Guild Wars 2. It is kind of a shame. Like, a lot of what makes Guild Wars 2's combat, or not combat, but like its content, is about farming. And we call it farming because you're not going for specific big epic things. It becomes more of like a X amount of gold per hour, right? Like you're accumulating a bunch of junk that is not impactful in large quantities to then get gold. And that there's a lot of that in Guild Wars 2. If, like you said, the itemization was different, that when we kill the Shadow Behemoth, he drops rarely a Shadow Behemoth breastplate that has the Shadow Behemoth set that is somehow unique. Or even if we took it away from that, because that would require a drastic change, even though I think it's a really important topic
like a
when it comes to
Drakkar, basically.
Yeah.
Drakkar has stuff that you can really only get from Drakkar.
And in terms of Guild Wars 2, most of the time it's going to be a skin, right? Like, because of the way itemization works, you know, when you get to the bottom of the dungeon, you slay the big bad dragon, you're not going to get the giant two-headed flaming sword of fiery dragon decapitation that shoots fireballs when you swing it. You know, like, that kind of stuff doesn't happen in this game. It does in WoW, and it will in D&D, right? You get something, and I think it all harkens back to the original D&D experience. I think that's what MMOs are built around. You know, you play this, I'll play this, you play that. Let's come together, combine our skills, see if we can get to the bottom of the dungeon and slay the dragon. And if we do, what kind of loot do we get to carry out with us, right? Like, this is a very core experience at the heart of every role-playing game. And when you remove itemization, it does make the game more accessible, but it also, I think, takes away from a certain kind of experience. And when I know for a fact that there's nothing coming out of that chest at the end of the Shadow Behemoth, or the possibility of something unique and cool at the chest at the end of a jumping puzzle, do you know what happens? I stopped doing them. I stopped doing those things. And you know, maybe that is an experience that everyone has to kind of go through to realize that that's true. Like you said, like that guy who doesn't get anything from the chest of Shadow Behemoth is going to go next time and think maybe it will this time. But you cross a threshold where you realize it isn't. And so then that reward isn't there as much.
Right, so why experience that content again? Like, why go through that jumping puzzle again when you know there's nothing there after like the 5th time you're doing it? It's interesting. Stone Bolt King in chat said that's why the DRMs are what they're trying to offer. Is that true? Are the DRMs giving some sort of different content distribution?
There's rare drops. Yeah, I was reading that too. There's like, I actually got one. I didn't even know what it was because I was like, oh, what's this thing that's worth like 300 gold, like randomly dropping? But they're very expensive and they're very rare, but it's like, unlike, I guess, like I guess your car is longer unless you're doing like the speed runs like what Sneb was doing, but it feels more epic and you can come in at any time, whereas the DRMs, you're locked into that like 15-20 minute experience, and all of them, like I said, it's the same formula, so it's not like, okay, I did one DRM, let me go do the next DRM. I mean, it's just reskinned basically. It's just a different, you know, part of Tyria, but you're still doing the save some NPCs, escort boss over and over and over again, and
right,
you know, for a chance to maybe get something, but generally you don't get anything. It's the same thing. You're getting like more blues, more greens, and
Right.
some
It's not
tokens.
like,
you know, it's you know.
Kind of like unique mechanics in a dungeon or something, right?
Yeah,
And like you
Yeah.
said, the chance is really low. Like Sarah,
it's really low.
right, like Sarah mentioned in chat, like what if every world boss had their own associated armor set? And in a way, ESO does that, right? Like you
Yeah,
can
they
do
do.
different dungeons, and each different dungeon has their own different armor set, and the odds of getting those pieces are not ridiculously low. So there is reason to keep doing them, and obviously you have to do them more often. You want the different pieces, and you can trade with other players also, which is nice. But
Well, Parse brought up the
BDO
infusions,
boss armor is
right?
the same.
And infusions is definitely a thing. There are infusions like that. Like I have actually made myself go into. It's shocking that this is true. I have dragged myself out of the aerodrome to go to the stupid Choya Pinata in the slim hope that I will maybe someday get a what is it? The
The confetti.
confetti infusion, which I want, right? I would love a confetti infusion. I've always wanted one of those, and yet the chances of me ever getting one is so low that it does,
Yeah.
it trivializes the experience. Like I know that
And
I'm
it-
not going to get one. And
Again,
I'm
it's
not
a-
willing to do it that much in the hopes of getting
well,
it.
right,
It's
do
a
it
fashion thing only too. So
point. Like the last Hobbit said, they don't really like the fact that so many gamers prefer the in-game rewards over the enjoyment of the activity. But then you have to ask yourself, what's the point of doing the activity over and over and over again
Yeah.
without a reward potential? So yeah, for the first time you played that activity, that's great. Maybe even the second time or third time, but eventually there's going to need to be some sort of incentive to keep going.
I also think a lot of us here are the quintessential definition of people that enjoy the gameplay. We're doing raids over and over and over. There's
I was
no
gonna say the
reward
same
in
thing.
raids, and there, it is purely for the content. Like,
Another
if
defender pistol from Kieran.
yeah, exactly. Like,
Yay!
if DRMs had that kind of content, then I would do DRMs over and over, right? If the content is going to be that lackluster, obviously it's a balance is what you want. But if the content is going to be that lackluster, then the reward has to be superior.
I agree with it. So I've been looking for an opportunity between topics. It doesn't seem to happen very easily. There's a lot to talk about with this stuff for sure. We've all been sitting down for a long time, and I don't know about you guys, but I drank a lot of coffee. So we're going to take just a couple of minute break, let everyone go and pee.
Oh, and stuff to put in.
Merrick's got a dad joke to tell when he comes back.
I do.
Oh,
I'll find one.
that joke.
Where's
I
our
got one for
Junie
you.
jokes? I haven't heard a Junie joke in like
Oh,
forever.
I'll find a Junie joke as well.
Okay,
And I
okay.
think based on chat, talking about crafting might be something worth doing when we get back.
Yes.
Make it official. Oh, now there's
Oh,
two.
no.
We both
Now
did.
there's two.
Yeah, there we go.
Team
Okay.
BDO.
Yeah.
High five.
Dang.
All right, guys, don't
The rest
go
of the
anywhere. We'll be
podcast
right
is gonna
back.
be puns.
Oh my god, so
You,
many
should rename, you need to rename this to Pun Break.
fun, right?
Oh
Holy
my
shit.
gosh.
Okay, we'll be back.
So I can see that not everyone is back yet, but I'm concerned because Cryptic turned off his camera, and I'm worried that that's gonna put it into a different order when they get back.
Nah, we're good. We're good. We're good. It's fine. See, we're good. Same order.
Oh, it did.
Same one.
It reorganized you. Okay, okay. I
I'm
was
that
concerned.
good. I am that good. At this, man.
How
Don't
could
worry.
you have known? Did you know?
No, I didn't.
Junior brought me some chocolate.
You guys- You guys have like a 20-minute break now with all the requests of jokes.
Oh,
May as well
yeah.
go.
Oh no.
I hope Junie
Go
came
cook
back with a
some
list
food.
of jokes.
I think they're all Junie jokes.
Ironically, I have a list of jokes in front of me
There's
because
a hydrate in
I found my dad joke calendar.
there.
Oh my gosh. Can you do a few?
We're getting a
Sure.
Zalu joke.
Dalu is well, that's not true. I'm not always ready for jokes. Sometimes I have to deal with children. Figure I should wait until this be right back screen goes away though.
Oh my god, I have so many Junie jokes to have to do.
Yeah, you do. I was just commenting on that.
Oh no. All right, here we go.
How are those headphones, by the way, Junie? They look really comfortable.
They are really comfy. They're
She
what
loves
are
those.
they? They're the ones that the same as the Cadier
The
ones.
Razor
but
Krakens.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
they're actually really comfortable.
You know what?
I,
I
have a
love
pair
the
of
look of
Razor
mine.
Krakens. I hate them. They
Really?
squeeze the shit out of my head.
Oh
I
my
can't
gosh.
take it.
So listen, I got a big head and I'm using ones that I love to look at. Don't you laugh, Cryptic. I saw that. I
I
saw
have a
you.
big head. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm pretty sure we all, a lot of us have large.
Anyway,
If you like those Krakens, you don't have a big head. I don't know.
no, because like, look.
I
I have these really cool ones that look really great. I love the way they look, but Junies are so much more comfortable because these ones squeeze my head, and the Krakens are comfy.
But you know what it might
Weird.
be? Like I have them like higher up, maybe. I don't know. They're pretty good though.
They,
I don't think I could give up wireless though. I love wireless headset.
yeah, the ear pads look a little different than the ones I have. Mine are also 6 years old, 5 years old, so maybe they changed the design.
I think they did change it because they're pretty. They're actually pretty loose. Like, well, I wouldn't say loose, but they have a lot of give.
I'm holding
is
this
the-
camera.
This is the real stream content. No one cares about us.
It's hard for me to hold it still. I'm holding it, but he's sleeping in this cubicle thing that I've got above my desk.
Catstagram.
Oh, show everyone. Cadwell.
Cadwell?
Yeah.
Cadwell. Little Cadwell, and also my Cisco poster from Cryptic.
Love Cadwell up there.
Nice.
I'll be right back.
Oh,
I have the Cadwell summoning portal in ESO in my house.
Oh, that's.
We didn't go see that house,
Why
Junie,
is he
but
so cute?
Well, I want to continue on with ESO. What do they call it? ESO cribs.
Cribs, yeah.
Oh,
Eric TV
Oh.
Cribs.
MTV
It worked
Cribs.
out perfectly.
MTV, that works. That's so fun.
Doing like house tours and things. I think it's because I watched a lot of those Animal Crossing house tours when it
Mhm.
first came out on YouTube, and I loved them. And now I'm like ready to go.
Hey, nice sassy.
Wait, there's a
should
cat.
Here yet.
Hold on. Here we go.
Mhm.
We should do some kind of like Merrick
So
TV house competition, you know, like ESO housing
Yeah.
competition.
Ooh, I would love that. In fact, I've been in a guild that does that. The housing, player housing is such a thing in ESO that it's actually pretty awesome to like have people design their houses and then show them off and have like competitions in guilds. It's pretty neat. What's the name of your cat, Sassy?
This one's Vincent.
Oh.
Aw.
I went running to go get one, and I almost fell on Audrey. I was like, "Uh-oh." Well, I'll take
Uh-oh.
the other one that's not. He's not gonna stay, but
You need to.
Zentress redeemed. Oh, Zentress
I
is not
know.
a
Five
Made it, just made a
million
new one.
points.
5
there he
million.
goes. Are you gonna sit? No.
5 million.
Oh God.
Zalo, make it a good one, bro. It's 5 million
It
points.
is over 9,000. It's 5
my
million.
God.
Wow, he spent his whole budget. Okay. You guys all may have a different definition of good, so
No,
you've
no.
been warned.
Our definition is the same. You go
Yeah.
ahead. You go ahead.
All right. So my friend keeps saying, "Cheer up, man. It could be worse. You could be stuck underground in a hole full of water." I know he means well.
Oh my
Wow.
You're welcome.
god.
Come on, Hat. I know you heard it.
10 out of 10.
Hat's here. He always yells at me. Well, not yells at me, but like aggressively sighs when I tell the dad jokes.
Okay, I have one. Here we go.
Okay, go.
Why do seagulls fly over the ocean?
There it is.
Why?
Because if they flew over the bay, we'd call them bagels.
I approve
I'm
of this
hungry.
message.
Now I'm hungry.
I'd like to point out.
Right? I want a good bagel now.
I'd like to point out that Zalu is a dad because he saw that joke coming a mile away.
Yeah, he
and
knew
was
it well in
excited
advance.
for it. He was like, "Oh, here we go, boys, let's go."
Yep. Every now and then, well, that makes me sound a little bit too arrogant. When someone tells me a dad joke and I don't recognize it as a dad joke right away, it becomes my favorite thing. And Merrick's favorite joke was one of those, the iceberg joke.
Guys,
Uh,
guys,
Yeah.
hold on. I need to gargle some water. No. How do you think the unthinkable? With an iceberg.
This is Merrick's favorite.
Come on. You guys are way too quiet. Can I get some? Can I at least get
Joe,
some
I
drugs?
Bastard
demand
when you say it.
a new joke.
Oh, I have.
I would say-
Wait, hold on. Young Pepe Hands doesn't get it. So I usually have to tell this joke a couple of times, which is bad.
The fact that you have to explain it proves
Mike
this.
Tyson. Yeah. How
That's
do
what
you?
makes it the best.
It is a Titanic joke. How do you think the unthinkable with an iceberg? It is you're lisping the whole thing. So it's how do you sink the unthinkable with an iceberg? Yeah, it's bad.
no.
It's bad. Oh no.
so good.
Oh no. Okay. All right. You know what? It's not my
Tragic.
fault. Zalu gave that one to me. Okay, it's his fault that I've told that one
What
so
can
many
I
times.
say except you're welcome?
Yes, please keep going.
Yeah. Could you do the rap, please?
This whole thing, Merrick. You should
Mm,
start.
I could
rap.
I can explain every natural phenomenon.
Oh no. Keep going. Keep
Go
going.
on. No.
Sorry, the grass. Well, that was Matt. We
When-
just
Sky,
messing
the
around.
grass, the ground. Oh, that was Maui just messing around.
Yeah, nice. All right. The mixtape, Sassy Cat Merrick TV mixtape
Yeah.
coming soon, guys. That's gonna be a subscriber reward.
I think it means Sassy Cat Zalu mixtape. It seemed like they were really popping off there.
yeah. I used to have that song memorized. Then my daughter's favorite movie changed.
Oh, what is it now?
Actually, recently it's Raya and the Last Dragon. We paid the premium Disney Plus because my daughter asked, even though I told my wife it looked interesting like 7 times.
Which was like $30-something, right? $30. It was a
Yeah,
lot.
it's like a $30 upgrade.
Wow.
So we could have just.
Was it good?
I enjoyed it, yeah.
We already
She,
have
uh,
HBO Max, and so like the Mortal Kombat coming out soon, like they just put it automatically on HBO Max if you have it already. So like a lot of the movies that they come out with are just free.
Nice.
We're derailing hardcore here, but did you watch Snyder Cut, Merrick? I
Really
just want to know.
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
I
we'll
did.
talk about it later.
Can we do an entire podcast on just
Yes,
this, please?
yes, we can,
Because
we
I would
can.
love to.
Yeah, we can.
Do that a podcast for that if you and Cryptic want to just talk about it.
I could talk comics like all day, dude, all day. And the Snyder Cut, I have so many things to say. If you guys haven't seen the Snyder Cut, it's the re-release of the original director's version of the Justice League movie, which I think most people assumed or agreed was not very good. And then Snyder came out and re-released basically like a 4.5-hour version of the movie, which was much closer to the way he intended. Anyway, that is a huge derail. Don't you roll your eyes at me? It was good.
No, it was good, but you said much closer to the way he intended. A 4-hour movie would not have worked in movie theaters.
Oh, well, that's
man.
fair.
That was
That's
not
fair.
gonna work.
Oh, I do one more Judy joke before we start again,
Okay.
since there were like 4. This one's really bad though. What do you call someone with no body and no nose?
What?
Nobody knows.
Oh. Oh. That hurt even me. Even Zalu didn't laugh.
I know. So bad.
Oh man.
Okay, so we're gonna get back into the MMO discussion. I have some. Yeah, Art loved it though. Okay, I have something that I think is I've wanted to talk about a lot. I really think it's an important discussion. It comes up a lot because of Guild Wars 2, and I think it's very important. I never get a chance to actually discuss it, but I'd love to get everyone's opinion on combat group dynamics. Okay, otherwise known as the Holy Trinity. Okay, this is a very integral discussion to the way in a group content works in MMOs, and we've talked so much about what makes Guild Wars 2 separate from other MMOs. And I have to say that having done Guild Wars 2 for a very long time now, and then spending this whole week going into other MMOs, one of the things that stuck out to me the most, one of the things that made me go, oh my gosh, like I forgot how this works, and actually found myself loving it and missing it, was in fact the Holy Trinity. So for those of you who don't know, group roles in the dynamic of group roles when you come together as a group, and the roles that different things function as in group content is fundamentally different from game to game. But classically speaking, the Holy Trinity tends to be a theme that has gone throughout since the beginning, since EverQuest, RuneScape, or Warcraft Classic. The idea of having a tank, a healer, and DPS as specific group roles, very well defined, has been sort of yeah, I'm not saying that there is one, Sarek, but like, you know, this discussion has been around since the beginning. How that impacts the way that combat is done, even as far back as group roles in just regular RPGs, like even D&D, right? Like the warrior and the cleric and the wizard. These sort of things that have always been intact, or at least been in our awareness when we play these different games. Guild Wars 2 was old enough, right? It was 2012, I think, when the game came out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, all right, so 2012, long time, right? That was, Cryptic said at the very beginning of this discussion that was sort of like a golden era of MMOs. It wasn't like the silver screen era, right? It was this sort of, that was the era of WoW Killer. Do you remember that? You remember that term?
Yeah,
every
much.
bloody game that came out, is it going to be the WoW Killer? Right? Like every game was either going to be or failed at being or whatever. And so there were so many games coming out that were being different in some fundamental way, just to be drastically different and trying to separate itself from other previously existing MMOs. And Guild Wars 2 had one of the biggest things that it changed was no Holy Trinity. And at the time, for me, that concept didn't even exist. How could you do multiplayer RPGs without the Holy Trinity? Like, that just boggled my mind. So when I heard it, I was like, oh, when, like most people were back then, I was like, oh, that is different than the previous games I have played, which means it must be good. I'm super excited. Screw the Holy Trinity. I'm on board this train. And so I started to play and really liked that, like most other people. But I think over time, I have come to realize how much I miss the old group dynamic roles, and they really play such a pivotal role in the other MMORPGs I've played this week. In fact, in some way, shape, or form, every other game that I've played this week works around the Trinity in a way that Guild Wars 2 does not. What are you guys' thoughts on this? Is this something that you think is essential to the MMO experience? Do you think the Guild Wars 2 did it correctly by moving away from it? What do you think?
I mean, the caveat to no Holy Trinity was no endgame rating.
Yeah.
Guild Wars 2 launched with no legitimate endgame group content that wasn't massive multiplayer open world, like 100, 200 people massive. So I think for structured, like, instanced content, in order to make the mechanics interesting enough to maintain long-term interest, you do need, it doesn't necessarily need to be a tank and a healer and a damage dealer. It can be a little bit more freeform, but you need people that are responsible for different things, because if there are no healers, there are no healing checks, which means the damage is always tame. You can always survive it or recover it in some way, or everything's avoidable, and, you know, in a perfect run, you take 0 damage. And you don't, you know, so then you lose that element of mechanical play, which, at least for me, is a huge draw to endgame instance content. So
Yeah.
I think to a degree there is a necessity for some form of role.
Yeah, and I want to just like dispel two. I mean, feel free to disagree with me, but I want to dispel two myths with the Holy Trinity. One, I don't think the Holy Trinity has to be defined by the style of combat that your game has. Holy Trinity can work in any style of combat in MMOs. I think we've seen that now. It can be all the way to the fighting game style of BDO, even though that doesn't really have any, you know, Holy Trinity event to speak of at all. But that it could work in that game, and all the way down to, you know, your standard like Final Fantasy with your, you know, your hotbar skills. And I think the other big myth with the Holy Trinity is that it has to be, heal tank support or heal tank DPS, like Zalu said. I think as long as you have class dynamics that are structured and required, it can work, even if it's not that. I don't want to say strict because it does need to be strict, but it doesn't have to fit that exact matching class dynamics. Like Merrick, you mentioned like cleric, cleric and then ranger and something else, or I think Art was mentioning that it could be, or Sarek was mentioning like melee ranged magic, something like that. Just the class dynamic that has to have that kind of like three-way structure is really all that's required.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like, because I know when Guild Wars 2 started, that is what they prided themselves on, was like, there is no Holy Trinity here, but like you said, for there to be some kind of in-game content, such as like raiding, and that you don't really see it as much in Fractals, I guess. Fractals is really like it is DPS and a healer, but there's no true tank. But in raids, we do see that. And I think when raids first came out, I remember that was no one wanted to learn how to play Mesmer anymore. Because once you learned Mesmer and your group found that out, that's what you played.
Chrono jail.
Forever, right? Yes. And then, of course, Druid, if you knew Druid well, you were in Druid jail. Like, that was it. And they've since, as they've added raids, kind of helped with expanding that world. So, I mean, the Holy Trinity, to me, it still technically exists in Guild Wars 2, in a sense. But it's not locked into, like, the Guardian is always this. And the I guess Druid kind of is always like a heal class, but it has other specializations where it could expand out into being, you could have a DPS, at the Ranger with the specialization, or you could go the route of healing. You can go the route of Guardian as everything. Like, you can do it pretty much anything with the Guardian. And I like that Guild Wars 2 has, like Sarek saying, it's hybrid and variations that it has. Whereas, BDO, if I like the way one class looks, whatever that class has to offer to me, that's pretty much what it is. If it's a DPS, it's DPS. I think there's only the one still that's a support class.
I think Wizard, Witch, and Shy.
That's true. Yeah,
Wizard and Witch are so.
Which one is the little Lalafell with the boomerang?
Shy.
Okay,
Shy.
I know that's the support. I do know that.
Yeah, so like if you wanted to play support, you're locked into the Shy. And I like that with Guild Wars 2, someone could step in and say, well, I want to play, this class, but they could be multiple things. They wouldn't have to only be that one, role. They could actually play other things, which is what I like about it.
No, that's actually a really good point, because when you look back at, and that's usually not a part of the discussion, but maybe it should be, when you talk about like EverQuest or Warcraft, EverQuest was incredibly locked. Back when you go back far enough, specialization or I guess it's always been called spec, right? I'm speccing into this or that. Like, that kind of thing wasn't really a part of it. Back in the olden days when I played EQ, if you were going to be a cleric, there wasn't any choice. You were a healer. If you were a wizard, you were going to be a DPS. That's just all there was to it. In Warcraft, I guess, is when you started to see that evolve a little bit in terms of choice, but it was kind of limited. If you were a rogue, you were a DPS. You could do DPS 3 different ways. You could be 3 different kinds of DPS. The same is true of mage or warlock, but then if you were a shaman, you had 2 DPS specs and then 1 healing spec. If you were a paladin or a druid, you had 1 of anything. You could be a healer, a tank, or a DPS. So in that way, and I kind of liked that sort of happy medium where the Holy Trinity was firmly in place, and not everything had to be able to do everything. Like sometimes just making everything equal for the sake of being equal takes away some class identity. If you could just be healer, tank, DPS in every single build, it wouldn't make anything particularly unique. At least for me, I think that's definitely a part of it. But I would like to
ESO, you can do everything. Every class can do everything.
Yes, I think that's true. I think there might be.
I mean, obviously some are better than others.
Yeah,
right? Like a warden is really good.
Drastically
at healing.
Better than others.
Yeah, but I can heal on my sorcerer, and I bet you I could get you through all the content in the game except probably the harder raids, right?
I think healing on sorcerer is actually not bad, but I think if you were to like heal on, I don't want to say it in case an ESO fanatic comes out and goes, "You're wrong." But yeah, I think that this is has evolved from game to game. But to go back to Guild Wars 2, it's really interesting that we talked about Druid, right? Sassy Cat brought up Druid a moment ago. And when we first talked about that, Zalu said there was no end game when the game came out. Not only was there no end game, there was no plan for it. In fact, they were really never going to do that. And it was when they lost a lot of people. I think a lot of anyone who was around way back in the day can relate to this experience where they leveled through Guild Wars 2 and they're like, wow, this game is fun. I actually really like it. Get to max level. Like, okay, now I'm max level. What can I do? Oh, crap.
Literally nothing.
Nothing to do. Okay.
It seemed like when you hit max level at the beginning that the drive
Okay.
was to get people to either PvP or world versus world, but if you don't like that kind of content.
Torkin_ just subscribed. Nayeric one, Nayeric hype.
We've seen, I think Guild Wars 2 is probably the last MMO to come out like that was able to succeed, that was able to make a turnaround, really. Because we just saw the New World try to do that in an alpha and just absolutely fall flat on his face because, a third of the player population made it to endgame in an alpha and was like, hey, there's nothing here to do. What are you guys doing here? And they're like, oh yeah, you know what? Maybe we should delay the game a bit and put some endgame.
Nowadays, that's a scary thing to even whisper. If you say that that's true about any game, it's you're dooming that game to failure, right? Like that is actually a really scary thing. In Guild Wars 2, it was atrocious. Like we hit to max level, loved the game. I think the overall reception of the game was that it was good. And then there was nothing to do. So we knew, okay, well, I'll make an alt, right? This is what I did. I was like, I got to max level. I did that in the Order of Whispers or whatever. I was like, okay, I will make an alt and I will go through the Priory, right? And so I did that. By the time I got to max level, this time I already knew. Okay, I'm max level. There's nothing to do, for sure. I'll make a third character. I'll go through the Vigil. And then I went through the Vigil, got to max level. I was like, okay, time to quit this game. And I quit. And I think at that time, there was this crazy mass exodus of people leaving Guild Wars 2. It was very, very sort of like a common experience where everyone left. And they tried to come out with fractals. And then eventually they sort of knew, right, that endgame was really going to have to be a thing. And when they did finally come out with their first expansion and introduced raiding, sort of bringing this back around to the Holy Trinity, they knew that they were going to have, like, they ran into where the group roles actually become a factor. And they had to make it a dedicated healer class. That's where Druid came in, right? I think Druid was an answer to them not having a classic healer. And to this day, it's the only elite spec in the game. It's the only class in the game that is solely slotted into healing. There's nothing else you can do. And because of that, it's actually been like the backbone of raiding ever since. But what Guild Wars 2 does not quite have, so nowadays it has kind of a healing experience, right? Definitely DPS, definitely healer. They were forced to acknowledge a holy duality. A holy binary, I should say. But tanking is really strange in Guild Wars 2. They could change some stats around, change some skills, create a new elite spec, and then introduce a healer. This was something they could do within the purview of the systems that they already had built into the game. But tanking, as it turns out, right, this is why in BDO you can say the same thing. There's healers, there's healing, and there's damage. And in a lot of games, there's healing and damage. Tanking is actually defined, if you really boil it down, right, is defined by aggro. Aggro maintenance, right? Maintaining aggro on yourself is really the core of tanking. What is the point of you taking less damage than anyone else in your party if you can't make sure that the damage is being spent on you? And so tanking really has become the crux of what games sort of adhere to a trinity and what games don't. Most games will have a healer or healing ability. In fact, Guild Wars 2 is kind of bizarre because every class can heal themselves. I think that's really what made the game stand out when it first launched. I remember when I brought Junie to WoW Classic, you know what she made? She made a rogue. And she killed several mobs and then was at like 5 HP. And she sat there, she goes, so my health isn't coming back. How do I heal myself?
Yes, this happened.
And I was like, oh, no. You don't heal yourself. You can sit down and eat, I guess. But it's not like you have a heal. She's like, where's my heal? I'm like, no heal for you. You're a rogue. Buy some Band-Aids.
Crimson Vial won't exist for about a decade. Sorry.
And then what did I do? I think I promptly re-rolled and made a priest.
Rerolled the priest.
Yeah, she re-rolled the priest. So this is like a really interesting thing when you talk about the dynamics of a group, because while raids do exist, and have tanking, right? Like we need a tank. That tank is different and orchestrated by an arbitrary mechanic because aggro management doesn't actually exist. And Guild Wars 2, in order to make a classic tank, would have to completely rework their... I mean, I'm sorry if any ANET employees are here. I'm going to call it spaghetti. I don't think they even know how
Spaghetti
aggro works
code
in their
is
own
true.
game. I don't think anyone knows. It was always a mystery. Why is this person... I mean, I remember like the theory crafting people used to make. Like, it's because you're closest. It's because you had the most toughness. It's because you did the most damage. But none of it actually held up. That's not actually true. And so when you go into a boss fight, that aggro has to be given to you because of some other system, which means that as a tank, the act of keeping or getting and keeping aggro, which classically has been the most iconic experience of being a tank, is actually completely removed. Your aggro is guaranteed to you based on a certain mechanic. Now, in some case, it is the most amount of toughness. If you have the most amount of toughness, you will just have aggro forever, no matter what. Or you're the closest enemy, or the closest player to the boss, or you're the farthest player from the boss, or it's because you pressed F and picked up this special icon, or it's random and changes throughout the fight. Everything has to be very different because the act of getting and maintaining aggro can't exist. There is no actionable aggro table. And this affects more than just tanks. Do you remember the classic experience of a DPS was how to DPS responsibly, right? Like how to do as much damage as you can without grabbing aggro from your tank. And so classically, a lot of the high DPS classes would have aggro dumps of some kind. And it was everyone's responsibility to sort of play together and try to allow the tank to hold aggro. So this is a dynamic that doesn't exist. And in order for them to get into raiding in Guild Wars 2, they did the best they could, right? They actually made a system in which they could do this. And I would gather that most Guild Wars 2 players today would say that there is a Trinity experience anyway in raiding at the very least. But for me, it's highly different than anything before. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it is different. I think it's like the core element of having like the need for a tank, DPS, and healers there, but the roles get dispersed and how it gets dispersed. And I think also there is some of that like that hybridness where the tank might also be giving out boons, you know, or there's something different. Of course, there's still like some like, you know, if you need alacrity, there's only the 2 sources currently. So there's still some things like to be, I guess, worked on to help expand like the amount of builds that can be out there. But I think they have done a good job of kind of still like, because I mean, I guess like you're saying in raids, you know, you kind of have to have somebody in a sense, although there are some of the bosses that there is no dedicated tank. But you do still need, you know, some kind of healer, because your own heal as a DPS is probably not going to be enough for most of those fights. And then, you know, you need that tank, but they've kind of done it in a more creative way where it's not always locked into that one class and that's all that they're good for. It's all that they do. So I think they did a pretty decent job at kind of breaking it apart without completely just dismissing it.
Because would they even have been able to? Like if they wanted to make a new, like an actual
Could.
tanking mechanic with aggro, I don't think they would have been able to do that. It would have been an enormous rework.
Well, what are you asking? Are you asking, are they able to do it with the resources and funds they had? I mean, I think emphatically no, but like, is it possible? I think that because BDO is introducing more dungeon content into the game. I think that if they saw that this was popular and then they said, okay, we want to add raids, I think they have the resources and the money to rework their system and add aggro to every single class. They could add an aggro mechanic to every single class and rework their code to make that work.
They created the taunt condition.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Which doesn't work at all
like,
that way, but it was bizarre when they added that.
Yeah, I know. But stuff like, I just don't think that Guild Wars 2 like has the resources, and this gets into like a whole monetization conversation, but I don't think they have the resources to make that happen. I mean, we can't even get content on I mean, I talk about this all the time. America's been complaining about this all the time. Like, BDO in 2 weeks gets more content than Guild Wars has gotten in and that just like blows my mind. Like, you know.
Yeah, I mean that is a huge thing that separates games. It's kind of disappointing when you come across a certain element of a discussion where it no longer becomes about like can they do it or will they do it. Rather, it becomes about like can they do it? Do they have the time and the money to do it? Like I hate that even enters a discussion. But that's what makes MMOs so weird. Like every different game has its own payment models, how well it's doing, how high they prioritize stuff like this. I genuinely believe that this kind of priority and like group dynamics in endgame PvE content is actually very low on their priority list. I think they know what people they're sort of catering to, and that, I mean, for better or for worse, depending on who you are, it isn't us. It's not endgame group PvE content. I think that they're really working towards those dynamics with. But I do want to say that, like, even though Sassy's right, like within the realm that they've got, if they weren't going to redo it and they were going to come out with bosses in raids, like they have been pretty creative with aggro mechanics or different bosses based on the system that is there. But I actually, personally speaking, I don't like the hybridization that exists. It kind of bums me out that the tank is also expected to be doing boons all the time. Like the actual responsibility of keeping and holding aggro doesn't exist and is instead paired with either doing as much damage as possible or upkeeping as many boons and other offensive boon supports so that other people can be doing more damage instead. So you lose sort of the tanking. What do I call that? I guess I'll call it the role fantasy, the class fantasy of being a tank. And you guys who play Guild Wars 2, you might have actually had to have this discussion with your friends before. I know I have, right? Like, I finally get my buddy to come and play Guild Wars 2. I'm like, dude, you're going to love this game. We raid here all the time. And then they come, and I've mentioned this before, but they come onto the game and they're like, okay, I'm always a tank. I love tanking. I'm going to make a warrior, and I'm going to grab a shield, and I'm going to be a tank. And I have to be like, we have to have a conversation. That's not gonna work that way. That's not who tanks. As it turns out, the frilly dude with the pink butterflies, he's gonna be tanking actually. So your idea of what like the classic tank fantasy is completely thwarted by some of the way that this works. Now that is good for some people and bad for others, but I have had to bum out some of my friends by telling them that. Unfortunately, their big paladin is not going to be tank. They're going to be healing or giving boons only. So these roles can be kind of restrictive.
I feel like the genre as a whole is shifting into a DPS mentality, though, in WoW and in Final Fantasy. And I don't know about ESO. I haven't played it much, but I know there are other MMOs where healers are expected to do damage as much as possible. Like when coming out of my WoW progression, I was playing a healer that I could do better than average healing and out damage the tanks at the same time. Final Fantasy's endgame week 1 progression is balanced around healers maximizing their DPS. It's the same case for tanks, so it's not just a Guild Wars 2 thing, and it's another kind of, like I mentioned before, with the whole community shifting development. People only talk about EPS meters and parse percentages and all this stuff, and you lose certain elements when you're so hyper focused on one aspect of. Honestly, it's a statistic. It's not even really,
Do you think that's good though? Like, would you say that the overall shift towards DPS being like every role needing to do damage, do you think that that's actually a good thing?
At a high end, yes, but I feel like there are, how do I explain this properly? Like, when it comes to developing a game, you have to, consider, like you've been talking about, the new player experience, right? And so if you have, and this is one, it's a slight criticism of Guild Wars 2, the polarity between people who know what they're doing and people who don't know what they're doing in a raid environment is like almost a order of magnitude when it comes to DPS. If you just took, 8 mesmers, well, that's not a good example. If you took 8 warriors into a raid, you're going to do shit damage. You're going to have a really hard time killing a boss. And then you go look at Snow Crows or Lucky Noobs or whoever stream their raid and they're doing, 10 times your DPS. That's problematic. But the people that, like most of us that have been raiding for decades, we love that. We thrive on min-maxing and optimizing and all that. That's why I still play raids. So it's kind of a hard thing to say which is better, because people eventually stop playing, which means you need new players. But if your game is so gated that new players don't find it engaging, or they can't figure out how to get into it without this huge time sink, they're just going to leave. And where do you sit when you run out of players eventually, right?
What about you, Cryptic? Do you think that the sort of like combining of roles into DPS also is a positive thing for endgame rating? Like a tank should be doing damage, healer should be doing damage?
I think it is to an extent, as long as it doesn't remove the skill in what those classes are doing. Like, as long as a tank is still vital to doing his tanking role, and a healer is still, a good healer is still valued, and a good, like, I'll use an example. A lot of these pseudo MMOs, I've been playing a bunch of Division lately. They've done exactly what Zalu was saying, which is a good healer, because you need skill power to get good healing. You build up your skill power. A good healer outputs a ton of healing. But they can also do a ton of damage because they're building their skill power and their skills. If they take a just one healing skill and then the other one's like a turret, that turret's going to do a lot of damage. And then a good tank can build things on the side to do good damage and still be a tank. Like, a lot of his tanking stuff can be based off kind of like a scrapper, right? So I think it's cool to have that in the game. But what ends up happening is that a lot of it ends up being like these bully spongy enemies, and there's not really a lot of skill required to being able to be a tank in X encounter or Y encounter, or to be a healer in X encounter or Y encounter. And so I love I would love to be a healer that can do a bunch of damage. I think that's awesome. But I just don't want that healing, that core component of healing, to be muddied down just because I have that ability. Because the whole party can do damage, now the enemy is just a bullet sponge, and it doesn't matter, what else. We just need more and more damage.
It also incentivizes the community to change, and this is what I realize as being an endgame raider, regardless of the game. The dynamics of the game don't necessitate a certain playstyle, but they incentivize a playstyle, which then the community necessitates. The community forces it, right? Like, raids in Guild Wars 2 don't need to be run the way that they're run. You could do raids. I mean, people solo bosses in Guild Wars 2. There's nothing that demands that you do anything. But because of incentive in a certain way, it changes the community, and then the community demands it of its other players. And that's why there's a giant divide between like more casual players who like, why are you making me play only these couple of builds? Why is the thing that I want to play not welcome in the raid? Like, it should still be fine. Like, I can do okay. And even though somebody who's like, let's use a specific example, maybe somebody doing 10k at Veilguard, use the first boss, right? A very strong DPS is going to do 20 plus k at the end of Veilguardian. A 10k player, a whole team full of 10k players, is going to beat the boss. I mean, it still will, it'll work. It's fine. Like, you're not going to run into enrage. You're not going to get anywhere close to that. It's fine. But because of what the community, and I think Zalu spoke to this earlier, it's basically how community has shifted and how players have changed, that it sort of changes the way that MMOs are played and experienced by everyone. The meta becomes sort of that thing. So if you allow raids to be easier, or classes that are classically support roles to be able to do damage, even though it may not be necessary, the community will force it. And that's what I've seen happen over and over and over again. Like, there were times, and I don't know, maybe not everyone can remember this experience, but there were times in MMOs where the tank that was brought to the boss, to the raid, was the tank that could take the least amount of damage, because bosses hit like a freaking truck, and you needed that, right? So like, the tank's only job was to go crazy trying to hold aggro and to mitigate damage. nobody was expecting them to do damage, like because the raids themselves necessitated a certain amount of mitigation. So you were a bigger, badder, awesomer tank that everyone wanted based on your ability to take less damage than others. And the healers that were brought based on their healing ability. And so like how good you were at healing, how much healing you were able to dump, you were saving all of your mana for your healing because the healing was going to be really demanding on you. And I genuinely do, like, this might not be shared by everybody. Maybe somebody goes, oh god, I'm so tired of healing. I'd love that I could do damage on my Scholar or whatever it is in Final Fantasy, right? Like, they love that. And I'm not going to rob them of that experience for sure, but I do miss when that was true. Guild Wars 2 has ended up being a very, very different experience where your tanking ability, your ability to take damage now, it's not even just that it's been diluted to the point where you're not actively trying to get and hold aggro, which is what I was talking about before, right? Like, that's never been true, but it was okay. But now you're expected to take the bare minimum amount of toughness that you need, right? The bare minimum, because the rest of it needs to be dumped into DPS. They want tanks to be doing damage. You should be doing as much damage as you can. I have legitimately seen groups throw shade at their druid for not doing enough damage. I have seen this. This exists out there. And so classes are not being brought based on the role that they're supposed to be filling, but instead either the offensive boon contribution so that other classes can do more damage, or their own ability to augment their own role with as much damage as humanly possible. And to me, that actually cheapens the roles. I don't think that's actually good for the overall experience.
Yeah, I think I definitely prefer
Hobbit
the roles being more
1005
priority. Like I said, I don't think the hybridization necessarily is a bad thing. I've seen now playing ESO that the thing that I value the most is the intricacy of the encounter and the roles being established. Like, I honestly think ESO has worse combat than Guild Wars 2 and BDO, but I enjoy the dungeon, the content in there much more than I do in Guild Wars 2 and BDO. And I think that I played a DPS that one dungeon we did, but I've healed before in ESO, and I haven't tanked, but both of those look like a lot of fun. Healing is a lot of fun in ESO from what I've done, and tanking, you look like you were having a blast.
It looked like fun, right? And it was. Let
yeah.
me just tell you, it was super fun. I loved that.
The panic was real, though. That's so funny.
But
for those of
Guild
you who
Wars
missed our
2
stream on Tuesday, the Elder Scrolls Online stream was a riot, dude. Like, it was we took 2 hours to fight a 4-man dungeon boss and barely won. It was really, really hard, and genuinely some of the most fun I've had in an MMO in forever. So like, that speaks to challenge being like an essential part of this.
But in Guild Wars 2, tanking, at least from I haven't tanked, and I've only done limited healing, but tanking does not seem fun in Guild Wars 2. And healing that I've done is not that it's unenjoyable, but the fun diminishes quickly, especially if you're in, I think in Fractals it's a little more fun because you're the sole healer that's being relied on. But in raids, if you're not solo healing things, and most groups aren't, most groups are 2 or 3 healing something, there's not a lot for you to do there. And there's just not, I don't feel like there's a reliance on you to really save the day. Like, we were relying on Zalu there was no, we were relying on Merrick tanking. Any one of those go down, and it's an issue. Even if a DPS went down because it was 4-man content, it was a problem. But if the tank or the healer went down, that was it. You either had to res that person immediately or you just wiped.
So that actually brings up a really good point that I wanted to touch on with what Hat said. Hat said healers being allowed to DPS also increases the leveling experience, I think, of a healer, right? Because you get to have more fun as you're leveling up. And it says allows them to have fun while they aren't healing. So would you say that the solution to that is that because there's so much downtime in their needing to heal, that doing damage is the solution? Or would it be better to have more fun in content where it's very challenging and demanding on you as a healer, right? Like, that's in the moments where things are going crazy and you've got to heal people left and right and it's very intense. Like, as a healer, isn't that what you live for? Even I have a freaking heal brand in Guild Wars 2, okay? It is so boring on every fight in the game except for like Cairn and VG fights where people are taking massive amounts of damage and I actually get to go around crazily trying to heal people. Like that's, to me, that's the solution. And Cryptic was just alluding to that there, right? With the intensity of the fights, the challenge of the fights, the demand on me as a tank to be tanking so well that I'm not caring about doing damage. Or that the healer is so important and going crazy. Zalu, as chill as you guys see him, you know how chill he is. He's like, guys, you have to stand in front of me. I have to be able to heal you guys. Like, it was pretty intense, and that was such a fun experience. I can honestly say that was the most fun I've had in an MMO in a year or more. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, I feel like that's a bit of a band-aid to the situation. Like, you know, saying that healers can now do DPS or some DPS to make their downtime enjoyable is really just band-aid. It's just saying, oh, the healing content is not, or the tanking content is not enjoyable enough in this game, so we're going to give you something to do when it's boring. Yeah, and like maybe you should make that content better instead of.
And I want to say what Zentris brought up here, and this was something that is interesting for me because it's bizarre. Like nowadays, we really do have this sort of binary role where we have like a healer and a DPS. Tanking is sort of going by the wayside. And again, healer and DPS is also completely viable in other game modes like PvP, and tanking isn't, right? How hard, like it's hard to make it so that you can like grab aggro of people, right? Like Taunt almost made that a possibility. And there are some games that do that where you force the targeting of a player onto you. There are ways that you can maybe do that. But I come from a time where there were actually more roles than even 3. EverQuest wasn't a holy trinity. There were like 5 roles in a successful group. And Junivision just said DCUO is another one that actually had a control role. There used to be a crowd control role in the group. So there was tank, healer, DPS, and crowd control. And there was a really important reason for this that speaks to what Cryptic was talking about, which is the potency and the difficulty of the content. In EverQuest, for example, and you see this also in WoW Classic. Boy, did we see this. Like I was telling Junie, like we were planning, like we were doing like a bank heist. We were planning how to get to a catapult that had 3 mobs at it. If you get 1 extra mob than you mean to, you're probably gonna die because mobs were very scary. So when mobs were incredibly difficult like that, it necessitated additional roles. Tanks really had to tank. Healers really had to heal. But if something went wrong and you got 1 extra mob than you intended, or 2 or 3, it was a disaster. And so you needed a controller to basically be able to mitigate extra mobs because they were that dangerous. I think when you have something, when you up the difficulty in general, and this is a big part of the MMO discussion, right? When you say that MMOs have gotten pretty, steadily easier as the years have gone by. It's like the most common theme of the whole genre is that it's just been getting easier. So like when you up the difficulty, it sort of makes all the roles that you have more important, I would say.
I don't know if that's a genre thing though. I think gaming as a whole has been getting easier.
I think players are getting significantly better at playing video games.
That's true.
It's probably both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, look at what happened in WoW Classic, right? Like, it took months for raids, the first raids to get cleared in WoW. And now, granted, people knew the content already, but like people were speed running the raids, like literally an hour and 15 minutes, week 2. Like, you didn't play like that back in the day, and so people are just better at playing the game. The availability of information
that's
is way higher.
Yeah, absolutely.
People are a lot more willing to share information. Too. Like, I mean,
also that
the world first races were sacred in WoW for a long time, and now it's a public event on Twitch. You go watch it, and the top guilds are. There's their strategy. Just watch them play for an hour, and you know exactly how to do the fight.
Yeah.
So
it was the same in EVE for a long time as well. I used to do what was the hardest PvE content in the game. I was really good at it, which was D&D sites in nullsec. So the most dangerous space. Anyone could kill you at any time. There's no security, and the rats are the hardest things to kill there. And it's these complexes, these like raid sites. And I used to solo them. And that was guarded information. Like the people that I knew that knew how to do it and knew that I could do it, we knew who they were. And no, there wasn't, you weren't sharing that information with people freely because you didn't want them to figure out how to do it so then they could go and start taking your profits. And now there's like, all of that is gone. Like everyone can see everything because people are streaming it, or it's on some wiki or something like that. There's no information hidden anymore. People don't guard that anymore.
That is such an integral point in this whole discussion that I never really bring up, but that's 100% true. Like I try to think about some of the differences that existed back then. The readily available information, like it was so much less, right? Like, and it also took a lot longer to appear on the internet once people even figured stuff out. And the willingness to share it, again, when it was sort of like kept secret. Nowadays, that has actually really changed the landscape of gaming. And John the Barbarian said, you cannot stop people from min-maxing content. It's in the gamer genes. And that's kind of true. But I would say that it's true now so much more so than it was before. There are experiences in these older games like WoW Classic and EverQuest, and for those of you who don't know, you can actually go back and do a WoW Classic version of EverQuest, which is P99, as the game existed in 1999, which is insane. But the experiences cannot be recreated exactly the same because gamers have changed drastically. And so even if you can make all the mechanics exactly the same way as they used to be, back when min-maxing was not as much in the gamer genes, the dynamics were different. Like the way that you interact with people and accomplished goals and had connections with people, that was a whole different experience than it is now. So this is a part of the discussion when you say, like, because Junie and I tried to go back to P99 in EverQuest, and I know there's a lot of people that had this experience with WoW Classic, where you're like, oh man, I have such nostalgia for the way things used to be. And you go back, you actually have this game in a time capsule. You can go back and play, but it isn't the same, right? Because so much of what made those memories were the people and the dynamics, and those are the things that will never be the way that they used to be. Min-maxing and information sharing is such a core aspect of this. And Zalu's right, dude. I remember when the new raids came out in WoW Classic, I was like, okay, here we go. This is going to be intense. But it wasn't intense. It was like a week went by and people had this stuff done and like on farm. And it, it's kind of shocking.
I think it was AQ40 was full cleared in 40 minutes of it being launched.
I'm sure they appreciated that irony.
Yeah. It was really, really fast. Like
AQ40
people were so over prepared. Yeah, it's like 42 minutes or something like that.
Yep, crazy.
I have to say,
I think part. I was gonna say to that point though about the information's readily available. Like I wanted to kind of go back because I think Sarek asked a question about what we think. And I know this comes up on probably for you a lot, Merrick. I know it comes up, in my stream, Sneb stream, anybody who probably does raids. Is that like you were saying earlier, there is that divide between the casual player and then the more elite players. And it's not necessarily that if they're elite, they're toxic. 'Cause I know plenty of them they're super skilled and they're more than happy, to help train people. But I think the fact that the information's out there, everyone knows you go to Snow Crows, you pull these builds, and I think the expectation, within a static makes sense, that you're always aspiring, competitively with one another to try, improve. But it's when it pops up in the LFG, and I think that's where people are seeing, this toxic behavior of, I've been in ones where the commander's like, everyone needs to be this, and this. And it becomes very clear, like straight away, the commander's trying to get carried. And it's like, I think it's kind of, I guess, that double-edged sword. Like, it's great the information's there because I don't know a lot about min-maxing myself. So the fact that someone else out there is like big braining it and they're figuring it out and they're putting it out there for everyone else to like share that information is great. But I think it's also I guess not a detriment. I wouldn't say it's a detriment, but I guess it also kind of works against itself when you're trying to get these newer players to aspire to those builds because they see, well, this build's benchmark is 30k, but I'm barely getting out 15. And I think part of it was like I was looking at Snow Crows actually yesterday to work on a Reaper build, and I actually had someone who knows it very well come in and help me on the Golem because they were like, if you just read through Snow Crows, like it gives you the order of things, it has like some notes, but it doesn't really tell you
call me?
Why you're doing well. But it doesn't explain.
Shut up, Cryptic.
Like...
I know you're thinking it was elusive. I hate you so much.
It just doesn't explain, why you're doing the things in the order that you're doing it. It just expects that you already understand exactly what, everything on a necro does, what all your skills already do, how they interact with each other, and it just assumes you know all of this.
Mm-hmm.
But the game doesn't really do a good job of ever explaining it. It's left for you to figure out. So there's kind of that, weird gap of information where you have to rely on these other players. But I think, everyone thinks, well, this person's, this great necro, they're toxic, they're not going to help me. When maybe they actually would. But, I don't know, I guess I feel like that information out there is great, but we have to kind of work toward also making sure that people understand, like, this is what you should aspire to, at least in the terms of Guild Wars 2 raids.
Boy, and that sort of alludes to another really important discussion, I think, when it comes to the way that information is handled, specifically in Guild Wars 2, because when people see Snowcrows and the way that the Snowcrows is held up as the paragon of efficiency, I think a lot of people don't realize that Snowcrows is actually completely balanced around maybe 5% of the player base. So like it shows you what the meta is. Like if you and your entire team are in 95th percentile of efficiency, then what Snowcrow says is the best. But so often not the case. And people don't realize that there's that nuance there. They have no clue. I think the greater community is told, go to Snowcrows and copy everything you see. And not only do they not know why it is the way that it is, like you say, Sassy Cat, and that can actually cause them to be much less efficient because it isn't explained why. But without knowing why and who that should apply to, it's terrible for them. And this breeds this weird, I would call it ignorant elitism. People that are ignorant of all of the information and yet carry with them a certain amount of elitism that I see a lot in raids. And it happens even to me. I will bring I'll give an example. I will bring a firebrand to Adina. This happens a lot. Cryptic has seen this happen to me. I bring my firebrand to Adina, and everyone goes, why are you bringing Firebrand? This is not a good fight for Firebrand. You need to bring a power DPS. Like Snowcrow says, right? Like, like not good. It's not, Firebrand is not good on this fight. But what they don't have any concept of is the builds that are really good in these certain settings are only really good if your overall DPS and group composition is such that it facilitates those classes being the best. And so like for most groups, the DPS isn't going to be so high that the phases go so quickly that a Soul Beast is going to be the best DPS. And if your DPS window is stretched out just a little bit, my Firebrand's going to cream you. Like it's absolutely going to devastate a Soul Beast. And so like this is the lack of information that some people have. And I've had people stick their nose up at me and tell me that I'm doing the wrong thing. And they have no idea why. They have no idea why that's true. But the other side of this is that, and I'm experiencing it right now, is that when we play ESO, I made the build that I played in when we were tanking. This is such a big part, right? And I miss this terribly. This is an experience that, again, is harder and harder to come by as you go forward in MMOs because the meta is so everywhere. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows that you should be running it, that you'll get called out if you're not running it. But there's a period of time when you play an MMO where you're theory crafting your own builds and you're making what you like based on what you think is good. And that is a wonderful experience that has a time limit on it, right? You can't continue doing that well into end game. And I was confronted with this the other day when we played ESO. I was like, I really want to get in raid. I don't want to make people wait on stream while I do my whole build. But at the same time, like, I want to do some things that I think are cool and I think are going to work. And Zalu and Cryptic, who are the ones that are going to have to group with me, and Junie, when we do this, like, you might resent the fact that I'm planning on doing that. I actually am going to go out of my way to at least spend some time making my own builds and doing my own things that I think are fun before that is taken away from me. Because when I play Guild Wars 2, the presence of the meta makes it no longer feel quite like an MMO where you're getting all these abilities and you're choosing this and choosing that. The choices are gone, and instead you're kind of playing like an arena game, like an arena character that has X amount of abilities. They're cookie cutter copy and paste. So if I play a P-Chrono, I'm selecting Reaper in Overwatch, you know, who has a certain kit, and that's all he's gonna have. You know, like you're getting these very specific things, and I miss the experience of being able to theory craft. So the presence and availability and expectation of adherence to the meta certainly does impact your overall experience, I think.
That is one thing that, because when I first played Guild Wars 2, and like once I fell into World versus World, like all I did for like 2, almost 3 years was GVG and World versus World. I barely touched PvE. Like I barely left to do any of that content. And there's so much theory crafting in GV, especially in the GVG scene, and a little bit in World versus World scene, like different, you know, if you're in an actual like World versus World guild, a lot of them like theory craft, like, okay, well, if we're trying to Zerg bust or we're trying to fight this other group, you know, we fight them enough to kind of see what they're probably using and how can we counteract that, because and it's constantly changing. So it'd be like, you know, if the next time you go to fight Zera, all of a sudden the mechanics are completely different than what you're used to. So it's constantly changing. Whereas I think, you know, when you're doing raids, obviously you go to Zera, you know exactly what to expect every single time. And so there's less, I guess, less theory crafting. But I mean, like you've done it, like you came up with your scrapper build. I was playing this Conde Reaper yesterday that came out of another, like, you know, more top tier raid group that they had like kind of come up with, and I was trying it out yesterday. That's not on Snow Crows. You know, so there's room, I think, to do it. It's just harder to find. You have to be in a group that's going to allow you the space to do that, I think.
That's right, yeah.
You know, because if you just wander into LFG and I show up on this Conde Reaper, they're probably going to kick me right away.
I get kicked on Power
like,
Reaper all the time.
And
Power Reaper's on Snow Crows, for crap's sake, and I get kicked out of groups all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much time we have left.
About 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. I was wondering what everybody, if there was a new MMO that was coming out, which there is. We get New World and Ashes are coming out in the next couple of years. So, but in those MMOs or in any new MMO that's coming out, is there one or two things that you really want to see? Like it could be things that already exist in MMOs or like a new idea that you just came up with.
Yep, I've got one. You guys have probably heard my speech on this a lot. And again, I always imagine it's going to sound really strange coming from me, who I guess if you were to watch my stream on a daily basis, you think that I'm just like a hardcore raider that likes mechanics and DPS and that's it. But the truth is that I want to get away from that so badly. And I feel like I've been sort of sandwiched into that. If I could get one thing back from old MMOs that I feel like is completely gone that I would love to see in new MMOs, it is ways to experience, explore, and manage your adventure in a world that is like class-based and role-play-based, that is not in combat. So many of our D&D experiences, right? Those of you guys who play D&D, like, yeah, rolling those dice and getting those big crits, that's cool. But so much of the role-playing experience that I want in a game comes from ways to deal with the world in more unique ways based on your class, right? Like in D&D, some of the coolest things are that the rogue was able to pick the lock and change the experience of the dungeon party, or that the ranger or druid was able to maneuver through a forest safer because they're a druid and animals won't kill them. Like everything that is on your skill bar in Guild Wars 2, because the skill bar is very small and because the combat system is very intense, is dedicated to combat. And I think most modern MMO gamers are used to that. I think that's basically par for the course for most people. But it didn't used to be that way. And if you look at your skill bar in World of Warcraft, for example, like I think that's one thing that WoW does much better anyway than a lot of other MMOs, is that there are skills on your bar that are class specific, that affect the way that you interact with the world, that are not combat based. You know, you're a shaman, so you throw on water walking and you can run across the lake, you know, like, or a mage falls off a cliff, but it can activate slow fall, you know, or anything that is like that. And there's so many experiences like that in EverQuest and in Warcraft that made the gaming experience feel like a fantasy world that I was managing as my class, that I think is gone. Like, as we boil MMOs down to just individual experiences of combat, I think it goes farther and farther away from what I loved about MMOs to begin with. So it's a weird thing to say. I bet no one else is going to say anything close to that. But that's what if I think back fondly on the memories that I used to have about MMOs and why it's not there anymore. It was the magic and immersion of the world that I was in, that I felt like I was my D&D character in a D&D world where almost anything was possible based on the tools that I brought to the table. And that experience is diminished more and more as time goes on. So that's what I would like to see.
Well, I can go off of that and mention something that I'm sure Merrick has talked about quite a lot of times, but Pantheon, whenever they decide to come out with their game,
Don't you shake your head, Cryptic.
That's never coming out.
No, you stop that.
I'm on their website right now, and it definitely seems like it's further along. But I really like the fact that some of the things that they talk about is, there's no, greater the risk, greater the reward. Bring friends, you'll need them. And I think part of the thing that I would like to see the most is if there is a way to make the journey more fun, to make that it more about that. Have a reason to bring your friends with you. Have a reason to go out into the open world with other people. And I think that might change. The big thing that I've been dealing with is that most of the MMOs I go into now, it makes me feel like I need to be playing a single player experience to get the most out of the game, and that I somehow have to shoehorn in my friends into my experience. And that's something that I really don't think should be the focus of an MMO. Certainly for the first 60 levels or whatever. That is a huge majority of the game. We're talking 200 hours, right? And you shouldn't feel that you can't include your friends in that portion of the game. And I think making it harder, changing it. And I really think, look at the Pantheon website and look at some of the stuff that they're doing, whether this game ever comes out or not. The ideas that they have, I think, are really valid and good ones, and I'm hoping to see those in future MMOs.
We should make a bet, Junie. What's coming out first, My Star Citizen or your Pantheon?
Plot twist: neither one ever come out.
Neither one ever makes it.
I can play some Star Citizen right now. Can you play Pantheon at all?
If
right
I
now?
bought the thingy, if I was a backer, I could play alpha.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Well,
see, yeah, you have to be a backer for Star Citizen to play, so they're in the exact same spot.
There you go. Okay, Zalu,
my
Sassy?
wish list. Yeah, my wish list kind of plays off of what Junie was talking about. Because the whole reason I play MMOs is for social experiences, right? Like most of my social life and my social structure is dictated around playing video games with people online. I have a massive library of Steam games that I have less than 10 hours in because I buy them, I play them one night, and then tomorrow I'm back in my MMO playing with my friends. And so more reasons to do more things with friends, not because I can, but because I have to, which what I'm getting at is world lethality. In classic WoW, there are quests that you cannot do alone unless unless you're max level and it's a level 20 quest. So forcing people to group up is not a bad thing. It has a negative stigma nowadays, but in my opinion, the point of the game is to play with other people. If you couldn't see, or like if you were supposed to play it by yourself, why do you see, Ted the rogue over there if you're just going to play by yourself? So
Freaking Ted the rogue.
Yeah.
He's so shady, that guy.
So, getting into a world where I actually have to either wait for Merrick and Junie to log on to do this quest, or I have to go make more friends. Like, that's what I want, is forced interaction with other people. And that also, this isn't something we talked about, but I feel like the negative stigma comes around other people being toxic. But if you can't complete something on your own, toxicity has a inherent negative punishment. That was a redundancy. So like if you are consistently toxic to other people, you suddenly become known as the server douche.
Yeah.
And now you don't get to play the game because you were an asshole to one too many people. The community weeded you out. That doesn't require an employee or dev time or anything. They don't have to make a system to ban people or to restrict people. They don't, you don't have to scare people into being nice, because you just get blacklisted for being a dick. And that doesn't happen when you can do literally every bit of content except the tippy top 1% alone. So world lethality creates, more interactions and better player behavior, in my opinion.
That's absolutely true. I was just talking about this the other day. We gotta let Sassy go as well, but I wanted to say that is actually like a weird thing that came out of EverQuest, was that you couldn't do anything on your own. Like, being on your own was almost impossible, and anything worthwhile was going to require friends. And so, like, the coming together with friends and allies was such an essential part of the game that if you were like a big jerk, you couldn't accomplish anything. I mean, what it actually changed was a dynamic in the game where your reputation as a human actually impacted your experience. And some people want to just be able to log on and be the dick. That's all I was talking about. But at the same time, like that,
yeah, I guess
it did change the dynamic and made it more communal. I don't know. It did self-moderate. I think that's what Zala was talking about, which is really interesting. All right, Sassy Cat. In closing,
it's similar, except I actually kind of want there to be more, almost like, not I want to say like a hybrid system, but I actually like some aspects of, like, I call BDO like the solo player MMO. Like, it generally, a lot of the content you're doing by yourself. Like, if you want to grind a spot for mobs, that's your spot for mobs. You can play like with other people, but generally people often like play it alone, outside of like node wars and that kind of thing. But then at times, like, if you're trying to find someone to play with, people are like, well, but then I get like diminishing returns, or I don't get anything out of it. And so it's harder to find people to play with. But on the flip side, you have Guild Wars 2, which creates, these big, map events, and either the map rewards suck, so nobody comes back, and then they try to like weed you back in with like an achievement here and there. But if you don't do it like that week it comes out, you may never get it unless they add in scaling, which sometimes they do, but not in every case. And I feel like there needs to be, for me at least, some kind of way that there are things I can easily do alone if I want to play by myself, or maybe I'm on at some weird hour and none of my friends are on and I'm not forced to play with other people, versus having some kind of content where I can do it as a group, but it could be completed, whether there's 10 of us or 80 of us. So some way that I guess it dynamically scales, not necessarily that, it's 80 man and they just breeze through it because it's made for a 10-man content, at least for open world kind of thing. And I feel like, I think Teapot was talking about this, that's how he thinks maybe that's what they're trying to do with the DRMs, is that it's sort of a hybrid, because you have the option to enter as a private group of 5, or you can just say, I want to enter a public one, and it just tosses you with, 5 random people. You don't know what you're going to get. So it's sort of there, but that still doesn't, entirely solve the problem. Like, if I want to solo it, I guess you can go to a private one by yourself, but I don't know. I guess there just needs to be some way that there's content I can do by myself if I want to, and I'm not like forced to play with other people or wait up for other people all the time necessarily, but also be able to play with, groups of people to do like the bigger content.
So that speaks to it being like a
two.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough balance, right? Like, and this is true from the beginning. Like, some of the most iconic experiences that I ever had, and some of the best memories I've ever gotten in MMOs, is a result of needing to group with other people and that communal experience. But I can tell you that when that was all there was that existed, logging on at 2 o'clock in the morning and being like, I can't do what I want to do right now because I'm by myself, was also frustrating. So striking the balance has always been, it's a really tough thing to do.
That's one thing I liked with Guild Wars 1. Like, when I was playing, like, with my boyfriend at the time and his friends, we could all like go in. There was 4 of us total, and that's how many you needed for the content. But if I logged in at 10 p.m. and they're not on or something, they had those NPCs that you could take with you. And of course, they're not going to be as good as taking your friends, but they weren't terrible. Like, you could still take them along and be able to go in, do the instance content. So I think it something like that could be implemented, not necessarily for these, big open world events, because I don't know how you would how you would do something like that. But if there's these instance contents like the DRMs that I could, select, well, I want my healer, I want some DPS, and then there's me, and go in and be able to do it by myself if I feel like it. So I think giving people the options out there to be able to complete the different content would be ideal for me.
John the Barbarian said, I will say letting players kill quest NPCs and allowing high-level players to block progression for others in WoW was a terrible design choice. There definitely was some of that stuff that went on back in the day. I do remember that happening. Where's my quest NPC? Oh, it's been killed. It's been killed by that horde guy over there.
Yeah, I guess for me, real quick, since I know we got to end here. I mean, there's a lot of things I want: player housing,
player housing,
good end game content. Yeah, I mean, ESO has done two things really well: end game content and player housing. Just copy those two things. Let's go.
Housing would be good too.
Yeah. And good an engaging combat system, and it doesn't have to be an action combat system, just engaging in general. But I think the big thing for me, because I think any MMO designer should at least want those things as well. They may not succeed, but I would hope they would want those things as well. The one thing that I think that they don't necessarily want, because they're kind of stuck in some of these MMO constructs, is a gear progression system, and we talked about this last night, Merrick, a gear progression system that does not penalize someone drastically when a new expansion comes out.
But still has the progression.
But still has the progression. Yeah, that's the
a
key
hard
part.
balance, man.
I know it cannot be Guild Wars 2 where there is no progression. There needs to be progression. But tell me if I'm wrong, Sassy-Cat. And obviously, you can't. The enhancement system would not work in any other game. You can't just take that. But BDO, when a new, like, we don't get expansions, but I'll use the word expansion. When the new mountain area comes out in a couple of months, my gear is not going to be invalidated. There's new gear for me to get. There's probably going to be, I'm guessing, a belt, right? There's going to be a new belt or a necklace that is going to have a higher AP that I'm going to have to grind for. But my gear is not invalidated. I have something to work towards, and my gear still feels useful. I want that in other MMOs. I like when WoW comes out with a new expansion, all of my gear is pointless. And now I'm putting on blue gear and green gear that I found from quests. That feels terrible. And and if I'm several expansions behind, now it just feels even worse,
And
it's like you get to maintain what you have, but still have that, the new carrot to go and obtain, basically.
Yeah. And obviously the enhancement system would not work in any other, MMO, but just the basic underlying structure of, I was telling Merrick last night, obviously you can't just do one item in another MMO because there wouldn't be an enhancement system. But if you drop 3 or 4 gear sets and, that's what you're grinding towards, and the gear has slight stat increases and the old gear was given slight stat increases and you have to grind for that stuff as well. Well, the slight stat increase means that person has a 10 or 20%, advantage. But my gear is still, I can go, that gear that I go on, I don't have to play through the main quest to get a bunch of green gear. I can play through the main quest and do dungeons and raids on my old gear, and I'll be a bit behind, but I can still do that content that is required for me to get the new gear. Whereas, I tell me if I'm wrong, but any people that play Final Fantasy and WoW, the standard, expansion progression, when the new expansion comes out, your gear is invalidated and you have to go, you play through the main quest or whatever, and you get blue gear and green gear, and then you go into raids with that gear, whatever the max level gear is, not with your old gear. Doesn't that feel
dungeons first
bad?
And then raids? But that is the progression.
Doesn't that feel bad? Wouldn't you rather be able to keep your awesome look and your awesome gear and go do raids in that and get the new max level gear with that?
It was even worse when there was no transmog system at all in WoW. At least now you can keep the cool gear and make it look cool. In fact, it is actually created. You know what's weird about this? Some of the most fun I ever had in WoW was not being up and current with current raid progression. It was the next expansion coming out and trivializing the previous expansion so that I could go and duo raids with my buddy. And have it actually be pretty challenging, a 2-man content, and go and get some of the skins that I never got before, and actually be able to make it as part of my transmog. It's like an artificially created fun thing based on the system that was there. But in general, you're right. Yeah, what ends up happening is you sort of go into it acknowledging that is the overall progression of the game. Like a new expansion comes out, you all go, okay, time to start fresh, and you all rush, and you build up again for another year, right? And then or 2 years, and then another expansion comes out, and you know that that's the life cycle. It's the life cycle of your thing. So it re-incentivizes you to go through the process again, which for me is actually like something that feels really good to me right now, because right now I'm playing a game where I have zero incentive to do anything.
I know, and I know that those people are going to scream is that it gives you a reset. It gives you a point so that if
no
you
one's
going to
scream in favor of this. Everyone is on your side. Trust me.
Well,
nobody likes the gear treadmill.
Some people are going to say that the people like the minority like Merrick are going to say that you know that the reset is important. But I think, and again, feel free to disagree with me, Sassy, but I think BDO and like Diablo, who did it before then, have solved this with seasons, right? Like that is your reset, that is your catch up mechanic. So you never, and in fact, you can do it whenever a season comes along. You don't have to wait for the expansion. If you suddenly get a hungering to play BDO and you're like, oh man, or Diablo, like I want to get back into this, like, oh, your catch-up mechanic is there whenever the season is running, and you don't have to wait for that new expansion to drop.
Yeah. The season thing is kind of an interesting like addition that they did. Because you can level up and you get I forget what the item is, but you can basically
Tuvala gear or something.
Yeah, the Tuvala gear, which you can then convert into higher level gear. So you could, once you exit the season character and place it into the main, I guess, server worlds, it's already geared. You don't have to now re-grind for new gear, which is you've already done it within the season.
Yeah, you're at basically like a soft cap, which is a baseline to go do things.
Seasons are interesting, right? Like that was originated by other genres of games. Like that's not an MMO thing. That comes from more like ARPGs, and that's a system that's been around for a long time. That was a really genius way of keeping content relevant, or basically giving people incentive to start over and have replayability. Right? That's really that's the holy grail of any online game is replayability. That's what you really want. And seasons give like this. Artificially created incentive to be like, well, let's start over and do something new again, and it'll be fun this time because it'll be slightly different, and we all get this fresh start that we can kind of appreciate, which in a way is an interesting way of encapsulating the experience of an MMO doing a new expansion and another gear treadmill, except that you can try to do away with the negative while keeping the positive in some systems with these seasons, right? Like maybe the new season doesn't actually replace your old character. You can still keep that and play not the new season character. Or by the time the season is over, it gets dumped into the overall pool of non-seasonal characters. Like there are ways to like not invalidate your previous stuff by adding the new stuff. In an MMO, it's a little bit more challenging than that. So, but it's interesting to think that they're trying to work with the season system.
Well, that's what BDO does. Your character just gets dumped into with the other characters, so it doesn't invalidate the stuff that you've done. It just adds to that pool. Yeah. And like, imagine if Guild Wars 2 had seasons, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be create a new character. It's just like, okay, if you even want to do it on one of your old characters, here are these milestones. Here are actual goals for you. Go complete the main story. Go, complete Dragon's End or Dragon's Stand. Go do a level 50 fractal. Go do a level 100 fractal. Go complete this raid boss. And then you get rewards from that, not just the content, which, we know the rewards are good in some places, bad in others, but the completing that milestone objective in the season gives you another reward. Here's a ascended chest. Here's, wouldn't it be awesome? Here's it would tank the market, but here's a legendary here's a precursor, like that would be stuff that people would be excited, I think, to, or without tanking the market, here's a Gen 2 precursor because you completed this season, you went through all the steps, you did all the goals.
It's a way to, again, like artificially incentivize you to do content that you normally would not be doing. And in Guild Wars 2, that is actually what we're sort of looking for no matter what. Like some sort of incentive to go and do content in a game that you can't fault them, right? It's one of the most unique things about the game is that you want to be able to not ever feel like you're behind, but they then have to find interesting ways to incentivize you to do new content. If you have everything that you ever need the moment that you hit max level, incentivizing you to do additional things that come out is a daunting task. So sometimes they've done things that work, sometimes they don't. I think that a seasonal system in some way, shape, or form could be pretty interesting. I think that actually could be kind of cool to do. I'm not sure exactly how that works. I remember thinking to myself when I saw Path of Exile for the first time, and I'd played Diablo for years and years, and I'm like a weird guy. I like hardcore, and so if you play hardcore and you play a character and then you die, the character's deleted forever. And I thought, wow, that's so intense, and I had a lot of good memories from that. Bad ones too, obviously. But one of the cool things about PoE was that they were like, well, let's take hardcore and we'll make it so that if your character dies, instead of just being deleted, it just becomes softcore. So you can only be hardcore for X amount of time until you die, but then the character isn't wasted. It just becomes a softcore character after that. And that was the first time I ever saw something like that, like a seasonal or temporary state that could incentivize additional replayability that doesn't necessarily have to invalidate the old stuff. It was cool.
Yeah.
I really liked that about Path of Exile, that you could try the hardcore content, but you didn't actually lose your character entirely. It just kind of got pushed off into another dimension.
Yeah, that was nice. Okay, guys, I guess we will probably wrap it up here. I really want to thank everyone for coming out. This has been a ton of fun. We used to do these back in the day. We're obviously like a lot bigger budget now is what we look like here, but it's been really great to have everyone come. I want to thank Cryptic, Junie, Zalo, and especially Sassy Cat, our special guest. Don't forget, Sassy Cat is a streamer, streams Guild Wars 2 all the time, and BDO. I guess also BDO streamer.
Stardew
Right.
Valley
Right.
also.
Oh, Stardew
That's the
Valley.
real content right there. Let's
Oh,
go.
Watch me farm.
I want to just like stream Stardew Valley now, basically.
Show off your Junimos. Do you have a Junimo?
I have one right
It's a Junimo.
at it. I was looking at it. Hold on, there it is. So cute. There it is. There's a couple of others on the shelf behind me. You have to play like scavenger hunt.
But we will be doing these even more going forward. We have kind of like had a hiatus from them for a while, but I'd like to do them like once a month maybe. So if you have any other guests or content creators that you think would be cool to have in our discussion panel, let them know, let me know, let's coordinate. I would love to do something like that in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed this sort of roundtable thing. What did you guys think about 5 people? I thought 5 people was actually pretty good. Did it seem like too much?
I like the 5 people. I think it's a good amount. It's not too much. It's not too little. It gives people the ability to just respond like when they have something to contribute. I like it.
Yeah, I thought this was pretty
Yeah.
good.
Oh, also for just going off what you just said, if there's any content creators that would like to do this with us that have watched part of this, please just give Marek or me a message, and
Yeah, I know.
we'd love to have you. So
Totally agree, Loranity.
Lara.
too obvious there.
What was that? Was that not subtle enough? So
Is
sorry.
that not
So
subtle
sorry.
enough? Okay. But yeah, we're actually gonna put the whole thing. I know Elf, you came in a little bit like at the end there. I'm so glad that you caught the end of this. But we are putting this up on YouTube as soon as I get it downloaded and uploaded. So it'll probably take several hours, but it will be up by tomorrow at the absolute latest, and I'll post that in the chat right now.
Oh yeah. Go subscribe to us on YouTube. Shameless plug. We're going to be trying to upload more stuff to there soon, and this is going to be the first thing. So if you want to come and rewatch the podcast or catch parts that you missed, like Junie said, it'll be up very soon. Thank you guys so much for being a part of it. I'm sorry if we didn't get to as much chat as we would have liked to. That, I guess, is a little bit of a challenge with so many people and so many things going on. It's hard to keep track, but we will be reviewing it, and please, we always have a section in the Discord that is designated to coffee break. So if there's something that you'd like us to discuss that we didn't discuss, or something that you'd like to sort of follow up on and maybe get some clarification on, or just contribute to the discussion continuing there, come join the Discord. We actually do have tier 3 Discord privileges this month, which is insane. So come and join us at discord.gg/MerekTV and come join the conversation. Would be super great to have you guys. If you like this kind of stuff, please let us know. It is a big departure from the way the stream normally goes, so any feedback at all would be really, really welcomed. Trust me, it definitely would be. I normally stream Guild Wars 2 every single weekday throughout the week, but we're going to be taking a little bit of a of a hiatus from that. We're actually going to be trying to change things up a little bit. I will still be streaming Guild Wars 2 throughout the week, but we're also going to add some of the other games that you heard us talk about today. So Final Fantasy 14, ESO as well, maybe even a WoW Classic Day. We're going to do some variety, so it should be a lot of fun. I hope you guys will come and join us. Thank you, Sassy, for supporting it. I know it's going to be weird. It's going to be a little hard on the channel, but if you guys come and hang out with us, it would really mean a lot. Can I get a shout out in the chat, please, for Sassy Cat? Definitely go and follow Sassy, please, guys. She's an awesome streamer, does a lot of variety as well. Part of Team Iridescent, which I am a huge fan of, and hugely spiteful that I cannot join myself.
You're our favorite cheerleader.
I do love the team. I love everyone in it. Loranity is one of my favorite human beings as well. Definitely go check out Loranity. I am a part of Delusional Elitist Stream Team, guys. We do a lot in Guild Wars 2 with some really big stuff coming. So make sure to follow the Discord. I'm going to be updating you with some news on the raid tournaments that are coming very soon in Guild Wars 2. Hopefully we can be a part of that. So there's a lot of exciting things to come. Thank you guys for being a part of it. You're all amazing and beautiful humans. Let's go and raid another streamer. Who should we raid, guys?
We're just chatting right now, so it's kind of an interesting situation.
I know. I'm trying to look at my channel. Rage Assassin, go start streaming. Loranity, go start streaming. Sassy Cat, you want to start streaming?
No.
No. Stream.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go and raid.
This is a female assassin.
Female assassin? What
That's
are you
what
saying?
we're saying.
Yeah, female assassin. Let's do it.
You could rate a BDO streamer, you know.
Oh my God, you could rate a BDO
Good.
streamer.
Yeah.
I'm blocking all of you out.
Oh,
You know what? Weird thing. Everything's breaking up. I can't hear you guys.
Wait, my guild leader has 361 people watching him do a podcast on BDO Node Wars. What the heck?
Oh no.
Me, like, wait, why is it 361?
Yeah, true. You know, guys, I actually am going to
Crazy.
probably check out BDO at some point just so I can have more information on that. So stay tuned. We're going to do some different games coming soon. If you'd like us to maybe have like a different pool of MMOs to have tried before the next podcast, let us know. Maybe we could do some Terra, BDO, some of the other more interesting choices. There's definitely
just
some other ones.
You can throw any suggestions in the Coffee Break channel, or if you're not subscribed, you can throw them in the general chat, and we will get them.
True.
I
Star
very
Trek Online?
briefly played Terra. It's an MMO title I've not heard in a long time.
I hear it's revamped itself a little bit. Mox was telling us about this.
Maybe I'll have to
RuneScape
check it
3.
out again.
Oh, Zentress says Fliff. Okay, we're gonna go play Fly for fun, guys. Anyone remember Fliff? Oh my gosh. All right, guys. Love you all. You're beautiful. Have a great weekend. It's Friday. This is so big. Thank you guys again for coming. Follow, subscribe if you're into this kind of content. It's awesome. Love having you. Hope you have a good day. And say hi to Female Assassin for us, guys. Big hype in the chat for FA. Follow her as well. Bye, guys.